Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the slightly delayed start to the meeting. There had to be a fire alarm test before we began. This is the meeting of the Integration Joint Board Performance Audit and Assurance Committee. I have difficulty with that every time. And it's a hybrid meeting, so it is being live streamed. And I'm Anne Hannah, the convener. First item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Second item is the declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to be noted? Then we'll move on to the minute of the meeting of the 6th of March, Performance Audit and Assurance Committee, which is in your papers. First of all, is this accepted as a correct minute of that meeting?
Agreed, yep.
Thank you very much. And secondly, are there any matters arising from that minute that are not covered in the agenda? None? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll accept that as a correct minute. We then move on to item 4, which is the action log. There is only one item on the action log, and that's just a list of the things that are coming forward later, and the time scale is for 4th September. But if anybody has any questions on the action log? Nope. Okay, thank you. I wish I could think that the rest of the agenda would go as quickly, but I've no doubt it won't. So we'll go to the first substantive issue on the agenda, which is the performance monitoring report for quarter 4. And I think Helen Russell is going to speak to this.
That's right, Councillor Hannah, thank you. Just get up my...
Welcome, Helen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So this report gives a clear line of sight on how the system is performing as a whole. The key strategic question for the board is not simply how individual indicators are performing, but whether the partnership is moving in the right direction overall and at a sufficient pace to meet future demand. At a high level, this report is of partial progress. We are seeing meaningful improvement in some parts of the pathway, but the improvement is not yet translating into consistent system-wide performance. There are 3 strategic messages for the board to consider. The first one being progress and flow, but not yet whole system recovery. We are seeing sustained improvement in delayed discharge and hospital flow with significant reductions in delays in beds across the year. However, emergency department performance has not improved, remaining around 54% and well below national standards. This shows that when improving one part of the pathway is necessary but not sufficient. This reinforces that flow is a whole system issue and not just a discharge issue. The second is around demand and capacity remaining structurally misaligned. Across several indicators, we see a consistent pattern: rising emergency department attendances and emergency admissions, sustained waiting pressures, for example, psychological therapies, and high workforce absence in both NHS and council services. The partnership is still operating in a position where demand exceeds sustainable capacity, and improvement plans are working against that structural pressure. The third is around some improvements which are being delivered through targeted intervention. Where we have seen progress, particularly in delayed discharge, it has been linked to focused programmes, for example, discharge to assess, additional or redirected investment, tighter operational grip and governance, which shows that improvement is achievable, but it is often dependent on targeted intervention and additional resource, raising questions about sustainability and scalability. At a strategic level, the board can take assurance that the system can improve. Delayed discharge reductions demonstrate that coordinated multi-agency effort can shift performance. That community capacity is expanding in some areas, for example, care at home provision and reduced waits for packages, and that governance and oversight appear to be strengthening, particularly in complex pathways such as Code 9 delays. There is evidence that the partnership is prioritising the right issues and that this can deliver change, particularly when effort is clearly aligned and coordinated. Rather than focusing on individual indicators, I would like to draw the board's attention to 3 strategic risks. The first being whole system flow, which is still fragile. Despite improvement in discharge, emergency department performance remains significantly below standard. Capacity constraints persist upstream and downstream. The second is around workforce sustainability, which is a limiting factor. Absence remains high across council at 8.9% and NHS at 8.2%. Long-term absence is a significant component of this. The third is around access and waiting times in key services. So psychological therapies performance remains below target. There's very long waits persist for some cohorts, and recovery is unlikely without additional investment. A key theme running across this report is that improvements in one area are not yet translating into system-wide impact. There is a need for stronger alignment between programmes, a requirement for clear prioritisation and sequencing of transformation activity, and a risk that short-term gains are not yet embedded or scalable. In summary, this report demonstrates that the partnership can deliver improvement, particularly where effort is focused and aligned. However, the system as a whole remains under significant pressure and improvement is not yet consistent across the full pathway. Any questions or comments? Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this report? David?
Thank you very much. Can I thank Helen for the report? So a couple of areas that caused me some anxiety to ask 1 or 2 questions. I suppose if I had a business portfolio, I wouldn't want to buy our ED service because it's just not performing at all. And I wonder what's really underpinning that particular issue. Because the performance down at 54% is shockingly poor. The other thing that concerns me is the level of absence, both in health and the council areas. Verging on 10%. There's a variety of issues here. What's the cost of that absence to us? What's the impact on the service delivery? Or are we overstaffed if we can run with 10% staff constantly? Thank you.
Okay. Who do I go to for the answer to this one?
I can speak from a data perspective, but not an operational, so I'll hand over to somebody else for that one.
Okay. Caroline, are you able to pick that one up?
Okay, Chair. So I think if I perhaps start, and Marie might want to come in, but in terms of the ED performance, there has been concerted effort around improvement work around that, and I know Helen referenced whole system work, so some of that's about improving our performance around delayed discharge. Now what that hasn't translated to is a significant impact or improvement around the ED waiting times. Some of that's to do with increased demand on what's coming in the front door. So while we've improved our discharge rates in terms of having a better flow around the whole system, what we haven't anticipated is the increase in demand in terms of what's coming in the front door. So some of what we're beginning to do is look at how do we develop community pathways so that we don't have that, significant increase in demand on the, in terms of what's coming in the front door. Some of that's also related to the work that we're doing around the integrated discharge service. That's a proposal that, I know you're aware of, that we're looking at actually having an integrated service across NHS, Forth Valley, Stirling and Clacks and Falkirk, where we have a kind of single point of contact around discharge planning, and we're working closer around planned date of discharge. So that should help in terms of system flow too. I think we recognise that there's real challenges around some of the performance around ED, and it's an area that we continue to put focus on and work alongside our colleagues to improve our work around that. If it's helpful, we can bring more detail around what that improvement work looks like, and what our aims are in terms of that improvement work. But it has been an area that's been quite a challenge for within the Falkirk partnership. The other point that I would want to make is the recording issue. So there is So how we record within Forth Valley can be different from other NHS boards. So actually you're not comparing like for like always. Now that might sound quite strange, but actually that's the context that we're operating in. It's also an issue within delayed discharge. So when do you actually record someone as being delayed in that pathway? That can be quite a challenge too. But, happy, Chair, if it's helpful to bring something back with more detail.
Thank you, Caroline. I think it would be useful to bring something back with some further detail of the improvement actions, because it is a matter of concern that we're not only seeing such a low level of performance, but it's also deteriorating. And I think if there is some work that could be done as well on the issue of the increased demand, how much of that is system related and how much of that is related to other issues would be quite useful. I think Tom also wanted to come in. Tom Cowan.
Yeah, if I may, in relation to the second part of the inquiry, which is about attendance management, I think I've spoken about this before, but we would all acknowledge that the industry standard is in the region of about 5%, and therefore to look at figures that indicate around about 9-10% looks markedly a deficit to that. However, I think, as I've said before, there was a deep dive piece of analysis done in relation to the contextual and demographic circumstances of health and social care services. And that analysis indicated that in view of the demographic challenges, which is often around an average older population, etc., the expectation in terms of equivalency of market conditions should be in the region of between 7 and 9%. And the reason why that's a bit of a variable is it's to do with identifying particular sectors within the health and social care market. But taking, even as they suggested, an average of around about 8% or 8.5%, we are still out with that without a shadow of a doubt. But I think it is important to understand that contextual relationship between what we might be reasonably expected to do in accordance with the analysis and research and where we're at. So I think it's just quite important to say that, but completely acknowledging that even all of that said, we are still in the outer edges of that.
I wonder if you could maybe say just a wee bit more about whether some of that sickness absence is related to the pressures that are on our staff.
I mean, I guess, Chair, I would be bound to say yes. The degree to which I could produce here and now evidence demonstrating that there are exceptional levels of stress and demand on any of our particular services would be quite difficult to quantify. There is a little doubt that we have that we are a pressured organisation. Our system pressures historically might have been seen as seasonal, but now seem to run all the year round. Increasing levels of expectation, increasing levels of demand, certainly the post-COVID consequentials that sit around about the expectation of people in working in difficult and challenging situations, and the degree to which people's needs have increased, I think, have made that worse. But in terms of an analysis of that, I don't have that to hand, but we would be happy to look and see if there was any recent research to indicate that things are worsening.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I have a wealth of people trying to come in on this
Sure.
point, but I'll bring Caroline back first.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the specific areas where we've got particular challenges around absence management, they tend to be within our care at home service and our bedded care service. Some of that is an impact of, the transformation work that's going on. So if I take, for example, the care at home service, what's happened in that service, because it was identified that it was going to go through a period of review, a freeze was put on recruitment. So that then impacts on, morale, but also impacts on service delivery. And actually, one of the pieces of work that was done in terms of the review that's ongoing is we looked at the workforce, and we looked at, the age of the workforce, and it identified that actually, unsurprisingly, we have quite an ageing workforce within care at home, and there's a real need to rebalance the recruitment and look at how we invest and develop that service, as well as support people to remain, as long as possible in the job that they want to work in. So there's some of the work that we're undertaking right now and the mitigations that we're taking forward. But we recognise that, we need to support staff through these periods of change, but it is undoubtedly is having an impact on the absence rates. I know that you also asked about, if you can manage with, reductions of 10%, then do you need the staff in posts? What I would say is these are regulated services that are subject to the safe staffing legislation, and we require to backfill when these staff are absent. What that involves is we're using casual staff or we're using agency staff. That has a cost as well. That is undoubtedly impacting on the budget as well. We're assured that, the outcomes for the individual that are supported are good. So the quality of care that's been delivered continues to be good, but it does impact on consistency of care for individuals, and that, again, that's another risk that we're working to mitigate.
Thank you, Karen. I think Marie would like to come in next.
Yeah, I suppose just quickly, just to say as well that I know you've asked about the cost, David, so I do have information around the council side. I'm awaiting information around NHS, so I won't say it now, but I'm happy to share that information once I have it. At the next finance oversight group, we're planning to have a bit of a deep dive on absence. So with our HR business partners are coming along they come along to that anyway, but they're going to do a bit of a deep dive, and we're looking to start a short life working group around making sure that procedures are being followed, that everybody's training's up to date on how to deal with absence and how we might take that forward and help, because the cost is significant. And as Caroline mentioned there, if people are off, and we have to backfill, if there are agency costs around that as well. So we're having a look at agency costs as well at that finance oversight group. Thanks.
So will further information be coming back to us on that?
So I can share that with the board, but I can do.
I think that would be useful. Now, I think, Nicola, you wanted to come in on this particular point too.
It was on the first point, so I put my hand down because the conversation had gone on. It was around the hospital whole system flow, but I'll leave it just now because we've moved on.
Right, Councillor Flynn. I've got Roger as well. I think you're still on mute, Councillor Flynn. No, it's not you're on mute. It's a problem with your headset. For just now, I'll maybe go to Alison Japp then, while you sort out your sound system.
Thank you. And I am actually going to go back to the whole system flow conversation, because there was a couple of things I wanted to pick up on that. And I think the context for that is the conversation that we had at the NHS board, because obviously you can imagine that the ED performance is a very big topic of conversation there, and the whole system flow, we've had quite a lot of discussion. And I think some of that is what's playing back into this forum, because I think there are some interesting context. So part of the outcome of that conversation that we've had is that I think the overarching view is that until we get the bed capacity down to less than 100%, that effectively that ED performance will not move, and therefore that we need to find a way to be able to get that bed capacity down to less than 100%. It has been moving down, and again, it's a whole system performance that needs to move that bed capacity, and it has been improving steadily for quite some time now, but it is still over that 100% position. And therefore, when we look at that whole system piece, for me, the question back is, when I look at this performance review, it is very backward looking, it's not forward looking. And what I would really like to understand is, when we look at that strategy, what actually are the things that will matter in making a difference to that? Because we actually know now through the work that's been done about where in the flow are the things that will make the difference and unblock this. So I'd love to be able to see almost that strategy map that says, what are the flow items that make a difference? Which of those are the accountability of the IJB, and what can we influence? So therefore, what would we have to be true to be able to influence that overall figure, to be able to influence that ED target? Because I think it impacts all of us and we're all concerned about it. And then the final part for me ties back into the discussion we've had, which is, okay, so what plans do we have in place to be able to deliver back against that? Because as an IJB sitting in a position where an ED target is the same as it is, we don't own all of that, but we do own certain key aspects that contribute to it. And while I look at that delayed discharge figure, and it is a massive improvement in where we are, it is still a significant number. And if I look, going back to that bed occupancy, what are the things that we can influence that will make a difference? What would have to be true for us to be able to get that bed occupancy figure down? And what is our commitment as an IJB to be able to meet that overall target? And how are we, what actions are we taking, and how are we progressing against it? And it's almost that type of clarity and visibility I would like to be able to see as part of the performance reports, so that we can really start to have a conversation that isn't just about, well, where are we? It is about, are we taking the right actions? Are we actually making the progress that we think we need to make? And of the actions that we're taking, are they having the impact that we think we are, rather than a backward-looking conversation? I think we've got lots of great data, but I would love to take that data into insight, into action.
Thank you, Alison. I'm not sure if there was a question or an action required in there. I don't know if you could clarify.
I think it was probably an action. I was asking for, just when we come back with the details of what we're doing about some of these things, it is really, how does that fit into the system flow? What are we accountable for? What would we have to do as an IJB to be able to support that overall system flow? Therefore, what are we saying our targets would be in that area? Not necessarily the government targets, but what would we need to be able to do within our part of the system to be able to get that ED figure down? And then therefore, what are the actions we have in place so that we can actually put monitoring in place as an IJB? So it's just some more specificity around that plan to deliver that whole system performance with a very clear focus on the IJB accountabilities. Marie's okay. Thinking about it, I think.
Thank you, Marie. Well, I saw Marie writing her notes, so I think our officers will try to do the best they can to come back with that information. Do you want to say something, Marie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've got really valid points, Alison. So I suppose that's something that myself and Caroline can work with Tom and Helen around the future APRs and what those targets look like, and we can have those conversations and try and build that in. I think we're looking to get to be more forward-looking anyway with those performance reports and the updated strategic plan anyway. I think that'll all form part of that work that we're doing around that as well. Yeah,
and I think on the NHS side, there is more insight now that will help you do that.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Thank you, Alison. Jim, Councillor Flynn, are you?
Can you
yes,
hear
you're
me
with
now?
us now.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you very much.
Fine.
Sorry
we can
about
hear
that.
You now.
My comments relate to ED again, and they're based on in the main observations actually. The first one is that when it gets to late on in the day and people are in there for say 3 hours, quite often they'll have blood tests. Now, I believe on average the blood tests and maybe some other tests take about 90 minutes at least to come back. That then nudges them over this 4 hour period. And when it's late on in the day, you have the other situation where sometimes they're kept in overnight waiting on results, or purely because that's the way the system works. So it'd be good to have a if possible, a number on the number of patients that relates to over a month, because I think it might be quite significant. The other thing, which is not a criticism, is this shift change. When it changes in ED or clinical assessment, there is a period of time where, obviously quite natural, there's a handover, and I guess that handover automatically will delay things. So I think we should look at that as well, not to make the handover any quicker, but just say what is the impact on that, because 4 hours is quite a short time scale, and you can easily move over it. And as soon as you're over it, you're creating a different statistic. And the final point, really, in clinical assessment, obviously, which is next door to ED, is the fact that at a certain time in the evening, what would be a waiting area would be 8-9 chairs becomes 4 beds, because they move beds in to keep people in overnight. So I think that's another factor that comes into play there, where it's getting late in the day. They say, well, okay, we'll just keep you in overnight. So I just leave it with whoever deals with that, just to perhaps come up with some numbers and see if that's part of the issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I think they're important points, and will be taken on board as part of the whole system approach to it.
Thank you.
I think Marie wants to answer that one.
Yeah, I suppose just to say that there are continual conversations around what might be causing those delays, Councillor Flynn, at senior leadership team at NHS, and there are whole system leadership team meetings as well. So that data is looked at. So obviously I can't comment specifically on the blood tests and that information you requested there. If it's available, we can get it for you. But certainly I know those conversations are going on around that flow, and to make sure that we're examining that data on a continual basis. Thanks.
I think just to add, with the blood test, it's just from my own experience, but I'm not going to go into detail on that. But if you get one blood test, that's 90 minutes, 2 hours. And quite often a consultant or a nurse specialist will say, well, just do another one to confirm things. Well, of course you're going to go over the 4 hours, just those 2 blood tests. So that's a key factor, and it might be quite a number of patients, but I'll leave it with you. Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flynn. I think it's worth maybe just saying, of course, you mentioned that 4 hours was quite a short time. I think for people who are waiting 4 hours and feeling ill, it's maybe not such a short time. Roger, you've been very, very patient. If you could.
Thanks. Yeah, I certainly accept that comparing one area in Scotland with another area in Scotland is difficult because of the different ways of measuring things. But having been in A&E myself a few times over the last couple of years, and sitting 8 hours in a lot of pain, and the only good feeling I had was, well, at least I'm not as bad as some of the other people in A&E at the same time who were clearly a lot worse than I was. So 4 hours is one thing, but when it gets to a lot more than that, and that being very common, I think we need to focus a lot of our energies on reducing that to those poor people who are suffering in a big way. You don't go to A&E and wait 8 hours for no reason, and you see people who are not in so much pain just walking out saying, well, I'm not going to wait here this long. And the same with delayed discharge. People know that I'm a mental health officer, and I've got 5 people in my caseload at the moment who are delayed discharge. And there's undoubtedly a couple of them who, none of them, to be honest, need to have been delayed in the same way. 10 weeks delay for a couple of them, and it would have been very easy to prevent 10 weeks to delay. So although you can't compare one council with another in this respect, for 10 weeks delay for many people is a significant damage to their long-term health and well-being, because the muscle waste and such like, and the institutionalisation. I think 10 weeks unnecessary delayed discharge certainly should be something that they may be getting better, these figures, but there's a lot further to go for the people on the ground who are still delayed discharge. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, I mean, I was going to kind of come back to that, the way in which we compare with other areas, because you said earlier on, Caroline, that you're not comparing apples with apples, Is there action being taken to try and get a more common approach? Because I really do think that the data is important and the comparison is important. And it does seem to me that we should all be counting in a similar way. Yeah.
There. In terms of how the approach to data has been taken, it's actually something that Scottish Government are actively working on. There is national groups, so there's the oversight group that's been led by the Health Minister around delayed discharges, because it's been recognised that this is a priority for Scottish Government as well as a priority for us within the partnership. So it's an area that, and part of that improvement work is about looking at data and how do you, at what point does someone get recorded as a delayed discharge? And at what point, do you record that someone's over the 4 hours? Now that might sound quite straightforward, but it is extremely complicated, because even how you define someone coming into ED varies across Scotland. So there needs to be commonality around how you define these terms. And that's currently work that's underway nationally. So we can build that into the update so that, we can share where that's at nationally. But I don't anticipate it'll be an issue that will be resolved quickly, because this is something that's been getting discussed for a number of years. But, Scottish Government are very keen to get to a point where there is clarity around how we're comparing. If I may, Chair, come back to Roger's point around delays down to AWI, just really to highlight that has been a focus of real improvement work for the partnership. It's an area that we continue to work in to improve. But we have to work within the legislation and give regard to, the Adults with Incapacity Act and, the use of 13ZA guidance. Helpfully, there has been, new case law actually within Northern Ireland that we think will have an impact around the use of 13ZA. But that was just a judgment that was made last week. And that is currently being considered about how that impacts on practice. But what it's likely to do is strengthen the understanding of use of 13ZA, which means that we don't need to then give recourse to formal application for guardianship for adults that lack capacity. The other part of that is about looking at how we promote power of attorney. And that's another area that we're actively working around, how we can maximise and promote the use of power of attorney, so that people really have the choice in the event that they're no longer able to make decisions, that they've nominated who they would like to make the decisions. And again, that would impact when delayed discharges down to adults in capacity, because you've already got the powers in place to be able to support someone to move to their place of choice.
Thank you, Caroline, for that. And I think that is a really very important point. We need to look seriously at power of attorney to try and promote that. I know that there are actions going on that front, that I think we need to do that. But Roger wants to come back in.
Thanks. And no, these weren't issues to do with AWI. These were the issues where the powers were already in place.
Okay, thank you. David wants to come back on that one. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that shows quite a useful debate from the questions that we're actually having. If I could just make a couple of points in terms of when we're managing or assessing absence. One area that caused me some concern was that the mental well-being is at 32%. That's a significant issue for the staff, and I wondered how that was being looked at and managed. I would also perhaps see some benefit in measuring short and long-term sickness rates as well. But I look forward to hearing the planning targets and future work to mitigate some of these issues. Could I make just a small point? When we look at the initial document and we list implications, this may be how I look at the papers, but there seems to be little inference about the finance cost in performance on workforce issues. It might be useful from a board member's perspective, certainly from mine if I'm being selfish, just to have that highlighted in that key document. It just makes you analyse and read a bit more deeply into the following information. So it's just a simple thing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think Marie is saying yes, she'll be able to look at that and take that forward. Just one other issue I wanted to raise, but that's been a very useful and extensive debate on those two parts of the issue. I would like to move on to looking at the psychological therapies question, because that hasn't had any discussion as yet. And again, the performance appears to be deteriorating. I wonder if it's possible to say a little more about what actions are being taken to deal with that issue. No, I'm not seeing anyone jumping in. Caroline?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm aware that there is a number of challenges around psychological therapies, particularly some of the pressure points are in relation to the increase in demand around requests for assessments down to ADHD, assessments and requests for assessments for autism, particularly for adults. That's been a real pressure point. It's something that we're actively working around in terms of improvement work. And certainly there's a process around how you triage and risk assess when patients are referred, to ensure that we're trying to manage the risk that's around this, and to responding to those that require a service quicker. But there is a number of challenges within that area, and we're actively working on it.
Okay, thank you. If we have no other questions or comments, I think that's been a fairly extensive discussion we've had, and I think we've probably given officers quite enough extra bits of work to go in and do to bring back. So if we go to the recommendations, and the Performance Audit and Assurance Committee is asked to consider and comment. I think we've quite seriously considered and commented on the report. Note that appropriate management actions continue to be taken to address the issues identified through these reports. I think we can note that, and with the addition of the questions that we have raised and that officers have agreed to go and bring back further information on, can we agree those recommendations? Jim?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me come in here. It's just to have something down for the decision. So a number of comments have been made which relate to actions which officers have agreed to take back. However, there was a specific request for a report back, as I understand it, which was on a deep dive into emergency department rates in the context of the whole system flow. So I don't know if you could just put that to the committee to see if I have picked that up correctly.
Can we agree that that is added to the recommendations? I'm seeing nods all round. So yes, thank you. With that addition, the recommendations are agreed. So we will move on now to the item 6, which again I think is going to be led by Helen Russell, the annual performance report for 25-26.
Yes, me again. Thank you, Chair. Just got my notes. So this report provides assurance on our delivery against the strategic plan and national health and wellbeing outcomes over the past year. Overall, it sets out a position of steady progress in a highly pressurised system. We have some continued shift We've continued to shift care closer to home and support more people to live independently whilst also managing sustained demand, workforce pressures and system flow challenges. I'll highlight 3 key areas where we've made strong progress, where we're experiencing pressure and what we're going to do next. So firstly, there are a number of clear successes to recognise from this report. We've continued to strengthen community-based support, enabling more people to remain at home and avoid admission where appropriate. This reflects our strategic direction and is having a positive impact on independence and experience of care. We are also seeing encouraging progress in services that focus on recovery, re-enablement and re-enablement-led discharge. These approaches are helping people to regain independence more quickly after periods of illness or crisis. Across the system, there has been strong partnership working, particularly in managing winter pressures and responding to demand. While not always visible in headline performance, this has been critical in maintaining service delivery. There has been continued progress in shifting towards prevention, although this remains a long-term endeavour. The foundations we are putting in place now are essential for future sustainability. So overall, we're seeing tangible progress in delivering strategic shift towards prevention, community care and independence. But alongside these successes, the report is clear that we are operating in a challenging and constrained environment. Demand continues to rise with increasing complexity of need across both health and social care, and this is placing sustained pressure on services across the whole system. Flow through the system remains fragile at times. While there have been periods of improvement, delayed discharge continues to be an area requiring focused attention and whole system collaboration. Workforce challenges remain one of our most significant constraints, with recruitment and retention issues, particularly in key roles, affecting both capacity and resilience within services. And like many partnerships, we are managing a gap between growing demand and available resources. This reinforces the need to prioritise effectively and continue to shift towards more sustainable models of care. You will see national indicators referenced in the report. However, this data is not the most up-to-date and will be refreshed in the final version when stats are available in July. The narrative in the report provides a more accurate reflection of the current performance. So overall, while we are delivering progress, the system remains under sustained pressure and requires ongoing adaptation. The report also sets out a clear focus on improvement and next steps. So we're continuing to prioritise actions to improve flow, including enhancing discharge pathways, strengthening community alternatives, and working closely with acute partners. A key priority is aligning our workforce planning with emerging regional plans for the 2027 to 2030 period, ensuring better alignment with service demand, focus on critical roles, and development of new models of care. We will continue to build capacity in community services, which is essential to reducing pressure on hospital-based care and supporting prevention. We're strengthening our approach to performance reporting, ensuring that the IJB have clearer insight and better alignment to outcomes and more timely and meaningful data. Despite pressures, we remain committed to prevention and early intervention as the most sustainable long-term approach. Our focus is on targeted, realistic improvement that strengthens resilience and supports our long-term strategic direction. So in summary, we've made meaningful progress, particularly in community-based care and supporting independence. We continue to face significant system pressures, particularly in demand flow and workforce, and we have clear and pragmatic plan for improvement aligned to our strategic priorities. And that is the summary of our APR for 25-26.
Thank you, Helen. I think we thoroughly examined some of the issues on the Q4 report. So, but does anyone have any questions? Marie?
Yeah, it was just to come. Oh. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to come in. It was just to let members know that you'll be aware that an updated version of the unaudited accounts was circulated for the committee. So it was just to let you know that that affected some of the figures in the financial information in the appendix for the APR. So on page 117 and 118, and the graph at the top of page 119 will be updated for the version that goes to IJB on the basis that the committee approves the unaudited accounts are released later. So it's just to let you know that those will change, but they will be reflective of the figures in the unaudited accounts when they go to the IJB. Thanks. So we'll note that for the minute, if that's okay. Thanks.
Right. Thank you for that, Marie. Anyone else? Sorry, Tom Cowan, I think you're trying to come in. I do apologise. I can't see the hands up on the screen. I have to
too
use
far.
this one.
Yes, yeah, I need the screen a wee bit closer, don't you, Chair? Thank you, Chair. I suppose it's just since Helen's arrived in the team, and there's been a lot of talk about how we make both the annual performance report and the quarterly reports more meaningful and more indicative of impact we are making as a system or in individual services, and that it will become increasingly the focus in future reporting cycles. Quite often in historical reports are often the aggregating of countables and the data that is used for many purposes are then being replayed in terms of what's available to the board, whether it be this committee or the board itself. So again, just to reiterate something I know we've said before on a few occasions, but for the benefit of this and this kind of formal meeting, is that we are looking to evolve these reports so that whilst the underlying data will always be available and to deep dive into, what we're trying to do is evolve it into much more relatable, system-wide impact reports so that sense can be made of, are we making progress or not, and what are the factors in that progress or not. So it was just to kind of reassure members that that's the intention, and this first iteration of that might feel quite soft in that regard, but it will increasingly hopefully improve in the next few cycles of the quarterly reports and next year's annual report.
Thank you for that, Tom. I think it's kind of in the nature of performance reports that there's a lot of dry data appears, but it is important that we make them more relatable. Absolutely, and I applaud your intentions there. I think we've got Alison Japp now.
And my point, my ask actually builds on that, and it's actually quite an interesting read, and there's quite a lot of things in there that, while we have challenges, there's quite a lot in there to celebrate. So it's really an ask when we bring this back to the IJB is to get alongside this what the communication plan is, and how do we make this as accessible to as wide an audience, but how do we also tie it into that wider narrative that we have about how do we tell the story about how we are moving towards that more preventative type intervention, how we need to continue that story as we go into our strategy. So it's really, what is the comms that sit around this? How do we publicise it? What do we do with it, rather than just assuming it is something that we have to do from a governance perspective, because there's so much work and effort that goes into it, and there's some really good stuff in here.
Thank you, Alison. I think that is definitely true. There is a lot of good material in there, and we really do need to humanise this and come forward a lot more with the actual impact on individuals. David, and then, oh, sorry, I think Helen was wanting to come back in on that first.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Yeah, it was just to say that, you know, this report in its current form is quite activity focused. And what we're really keen to get to is being more outcomes focused and thinking more towards the impact of the work that we do. So I completely agree with you, Alison, on that point. I think there's much that we can celebrate in terms of progress and success. I think it's how we start to frame that and then think about what we're building on from our previous strategy into the next 10 years. And I think that that's going to be really represented in the next APR, because the 26-27 one's going to still be focusing on the previous strategy, because our new strategy won't be in place until December. So I think it's a really good jumping off point and a really good opportunity to celebrate all of that success and then think about the next 10 years. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Helen. So I'll now come to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Just taking up what's been said, I think there's a phrase that says, you know, success in Scotland's a hanging offence. And I really do not think we celebrate well enough and publicise well enough what we do. And I think there's something really there we could jump on and do something about. Given the size of this document and the raw data that's in it, I wonder if it would be useful to consider developing a portal for board members to access this information pre or at any time they particularly want, and it might help us understand exactly what's happening across the piece. And just one other point, I'm glad to hear from Helen that we're moving forward with some of our prevention activity as per instructed by government as well. How much do we spend on prevention at the moment, and what would be our future intention of spend? Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think Marie could come in on that one.
Yeah, so around you mentioned a portal. I suppose it depends on what type of information and when you would want to see that. So obviously we're bringing a quarterly performance report anyway to the committee. I would say that probably with, in between those times, I don't think there would be any additional information or any, periodic information that you're missing out on as a committee. Certainly happy to take that conversation offline with Helen and Tom and others around what information it might be that you would be looking for out with committee timing. But I would say that if we're gathering quarterly information, that we'll be heading towards that deadline each quarter rather than having monthly information that could be shared. But we can certainly have that conversation. But for me, I can't think of anything obvious that would be available at this time. Around the cost of prevention, that's a really good question. I would like to know that as well. I don't think we have an absolute definitive, here's what we're spending on prevention. What I do know is that, as part of medium-term financial planning and those whole system conversations that we're having, we know that we have to shift towards more prevention and early intervention. We know that. I think over the last couple of years, some of the, the quick decisions around the financial position mean that, you take more short-term decisions around prevention spend, and that's absolutely not ideal. That's not what we want to do, which is why the medium-term financial plan's been expanded to 5 years. We're trying to think longer term, more whole system, and I think that a lot of the transformation work we're moving towards is going to be doing that. So it's certainly, I can't give you a figure around what we're absolutely spending in prevention. There isn't anything that we gather to say this is absolutely that spend, and I think it would be really difficult to quantify, to be perfectly honest. Really, clearly. It's something I can think about and certainly have a conversation with you. I know we meet fairly regularly, David. So at the moment, I can't tell you exactly, but the focus is that we try and move towards that in a better way, I suppose, in future. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. I think given the discussions we had about the demand for the more acute services, it is very difficult to shift the emphasis towards prevention, but obviously as a whole system approach, it really is important that we do that. So if you can give some thought to how we get there, and I think Tom maybe has some more to talk about in terms of prevention.
If I may, Chair, and in fact what you've just said there teased what I was going to say up quite nicely. In some respects, we do what we can in the prevention space for fairly obvious reasons, but what we don't seem to do is see it as a genuine strategic input into anything. We don't see it baked in to how we do our business in a way that in which we either directly deliver or we commission a service does, that you can quantify that very readily. What we expect to see from the new strategic plan, which we all agreed is being done deliberately in terms of a new one, is effectively a mandate to start to reconsider how we do our business and the paradigm of delivery that we undertake with citizens. And in doing so, the expectation there is that whilst we may talk about in the strategic plan, because that's the feedback that we anticipate getting about earlier intervention opportunities, about prevention, etc. The challenge there will be that will also mean potentially disinvesting in some stuff that we currently directly do, some stuff that we commission. And I think that's the cards on the table, honest conversation we're trying to have with stakeholders and citizens at the moment around about the choices that may have to be, the challenging choices that may have to be made in relation to moving into that space. But I do expect and hope that towards the end of the year we get a public mandate to have that kind of a very clear discussion about how we start to move what we spend on direct delivery or commissioning at the moment into trying to support communities in different ways. And for me, that's the move that is required.
Thank you, Tom. I mean, everybody will know that I am absolutely committed to the whole idea of moving resources more towards prevention. One of the difficulties is, as I said earlier, is that when you've got the acute demand, it's difficult to, and thank you for your honesty, because there is a need to disinvest in certain things to enable you to invest in more prevention. The other question is, of course, sometimes increasing prevention actually becomes difficult to measure the success of it, because your success is people not getting ill. People who get ill and turn up for a service, you can count them. Those that have successfully been avoided getting ill are more difficult. So I leave officers to think about that. Any other questions or comments on this report? And looking forward to the new strategic plan when it comes, and the debate about prevention. So we'll go back to the recommendations. I can find the right page. The Performance Audit and Assurance Committee is asked to consider and comment on the draft annual performance report for 25 and 26. I think we have successfully done that. And note that this will be presented to the IJB in June 2026. That'll be the next Integration Joint Board meeting. Agreed?
Agreed.
Oh, sorry, and we also need to note that the financial figures will be updated on pages 117 to 119 by the time it goes to the IJB. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we will now move on and give Helen a rest. Move on to Audit and Assurance. And I think the first report is the draft annual governance statement. And I think that's Ewan Murray who's going to speak to that.
Oh, I'm just not seeing that. Thank you, Chair. This is a slight change in practice from previous years, taking into account the importance of good governance in the IJB and PAC. Therefore, the draft annual governance statement, while is embedded within the unaudited accounts, is presented today also as a standing separate agenda item. The content of annual governance statements is informed by various pieces of regulation and guidance, and particularly from this year on, there has been an addendum to the SIPFA guidance on delivering good governance in local government framework, specifically relating to annual governance statements for local authorities, and IJBs are essentially piggybacked on local authority legislation, so it is applicable to IJBs, and I have taken account of that guidance in drafting the annual governance statement. The annual governance statement, whilst governance can sometimes be a little bit of a dry topic, I've tried to make it as user-friendly and readable as possible. So it describes our system of internal control and the key elements of that, and incorporates a review of adequacy and effectiveness as is required by regulations and guidance. it also includes an action plan which will essentially be a reset from this point on in terms of our governance actions improvement plans, which will come back to the board as a standing agenda item to monitor progress on. Quite a lot of that is articulated in terms of the revised integration scheme having now been approved, and this being a suitable and quite ideal time to review and refresh some of our key governance frameworks, some of which have been in their existing form without a review for some time. So that is the raison d'etre and the key elements of the governance improvement action plan going forward, and will be subject of regular reports back to PAC, so you can undertake your scrutiny and review and discharge your responsibilities as a committee. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ewan. Yes, I regularly comment on the fact that much of what we see here is fairly dry. It's nevertheless very, very important, and it does require our informed scrutiny. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? Clearly there are changes in our governance situation, which you have to take account of, and good luck with that. So if no one has any questions or comments, we go back to the recommendations, which are to consider and approve the draft annual governance statement, and to note that the annual governance statement will require to be further updated prior to the consultation of the statutory audit to take account of the recommendations and assurance opinion from the Chief Internal Auditor's annual assurance report. Easy for you to say. So can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Right, thank you. So we'll move on then to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit plan, and another change of presenter. Welcome, Isabel Wright, if you would like to take this forward for us.
Yes, thank you and good morning. This report from Internal Audit sets out our proposed programme of work for 26-27 for approval. Paragraphs 4.4 to 4.8 highlight the requirement of the preparation of a risk-based internal audit plan as part of the global internal audit standards. In agreeing the plan, committee should be aware that the priorities and the internal audit resource could change over the course of 26-27. Therefore, the plan must be considered flexible as per paragraph 4.14. The planned internal audit work is laid out in paragraph 4.18, with the remainder of the section providing some background on the audit process. Paragraph 4.23 highlights that internal audit will produce an annual assurance report providing an opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the IJB's control environment. This report will include a summary of work undertaken and a comparison of work completed against the work planned. The annual assurance report will most likely be brought to the next committee. I'd like to finish by asking committee to agree the recommendations at section 2, that is to approve the internal audit plan for the coming year, and to note that progress will be reported to committee on an ongoing basis. Thank you, and happy to try and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Isabel. Does anyone have any questions or comments? You've obviously very thoroughly satisfied us with your presentation of this report, Isabel. So we'll go to the recommendations, and I think you just read them out, so I don't feel the need to read them out again. Can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on now to some more dry information in the unaudited accounts for 25-26. and I think that's going to be presented by Marie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and make it as exciting as possible. So this report presents the annual unaudited accounts for the IJB, for the PAC's consideration. I do apologise for the late issue of that final version, but a final adjustment to the figures in relation to resource transfer funds meant that a number of tables were affected, so we thought it best to reissue the full document for completeness. The public notice period for the accounts begins on Monday, the 15th of June, assuming the committee are content to release the accounts for audit. The accounts includes a management commentary of achievements and developments for the year and sets out the overall financial position along with key national indicators, as Helen's already mentioned. These will be updated in July and updated for the final audited version, which will come later in the year. The 25-26 accounts set out an overall surplus position of 5.6 million, consisting of a revenue overspend of 4.5 million, along with additional movements on reserves, the most significant of which related to slippage money from the Scottish Government, held to pay for community packages during 26-7 financial year, additional funds for whole system initiatives, which will be utilised next financial year, and the secured funding for the shift in the balance of care discharge to assess model to continue for the next year. A final outturn report will be presented to the IJB at the end of June, and the IJB will be asked to approve a number of adjustments to reserves, including the earmarking of £1.5 million to close next year's financial gap, which was reported alongside the medium-term financial plan in March at the IJB. The creation of a transformation support reserve and some funds for a locality grants programme in 26-7. The final detailed reserves position is set out in pages 42 and 43 of the document, with a final balance of 21.4 million, the majority of which is committed in future years. Contingency reserves have been maintained at 2.4 million, which is in line with the requirements set out in our reserves policy, which is a more favourable position than originally projected. The management commentary also sets out the future financial position and the continuing challenges, including the medium-term financial gap we still face of £14 million. Then the annual governance statement has been presented separately on today's agenda by Ewan, and this is also included within the accounts document, as he mentioned. The recommendations for committee are to consider the unaudited accounts, note the public inspection period, and to note that the unaudited accounts will be submitted to Audit Scotland for audit by the statutory deadline of the 30th of June. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marie. It's not often that we get to hear the words more favourable position, so I think we can be glad of that. Unfortunately, more favourable position is still not entirely favourable, however. Does anyone have any questions? Alison, I think.
And that was a wonderful lead into my question, which is, given this is the first time I've looked at the accounts from an IJB perspective, they are going to be public documents, and I guess given some of that unfavourable information that is within them, do we expect that there's going to be any public or press reaction? And what is the risk associated with that? And are we prepared for anything that may come from that? I'm not sure whether these just fly onto the radar, or given some of the information that is in it, whether there will be any kind of reaction to it that we need to be prepared for.
Marie?
So ordinarily we don't issue a press release after the PAC committee, but we're actually going to start doing that. It won't be after PAC committee, but Paul, our communications lead officer, prepares a summary for issue after IJB. So we're going to include information around the accounts document as well, and that information. Our overall communications plan is that we're going to try and be obviously as transparent as possible and get ahead of the game as much as possible, so that the messaging is out there and we're being really clear with the messaging. So part of that is around our transformation programme and the challenges that we're still facing. I realise that when looking at the accounts document and it's a surplus for the year, that might be a bit misleading, against our revenue budget position. But I suppose it's just being really clear that a lot of our reserves are fully committed, and those contingency reserves, there are not a lot of spare, in inverted commas, reserves remaining. So we will definitely include that in that messaging that goes out. Alison, hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Marie. Any other questions or comments? I think just suffice to say we are living in challenging times, and more favourable is still not a positive position to be in terms of health and social care funding. So thank you for your unaudited accounts report. And we go to the recommendations. So the Performance Audit and Assurance Committee is asked to consider the unaudited annual accounts, note the public inspection period, and note that the unaudited annual accounts will be submitted to the IJB's external auditor by the statutory deadline of 30th June 2026. We will undoubtedly, can we agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. We will undoubtedly come back to the overall financial position at every meeting. In that case, we will move on to item 10, which is the SIPFA Financial Management Code Assessment and Review of Financial Regulations. And again, this will be Marie.
Another exciting one, Chair. So this report gives the committee an update on the IJB's compliance with SIPFA's Financial Management Code. Good financial management is essential for good governance and longer term planning to ensure future sustainability. SIPFA's Financial Management Code is designed to support good practice and to assist in demonstrating financial sustainability. The underlying principles which inform the code are set out at 4.5 and include organisational leadership, accountability, transparency, adherence to professional standards and sources of assurance. I've carried out an assessment with narrative and details included at Appendix 1 and determined that the IJB is compliant with the code. I have set out some actions in the appendix, including the review of standing orders and financial regulations and the strategic risk register ongoing changes, which are already planned in the next few months, now that the updated integration scheme has been approved, as Ewan mentioned earlier. I have also recognised within the document that we still require to identify solutions to the medium-term financial gap and have set out an action in that regard, and also that the medium-term financial plan and strategic plan are linked closely during the development of the new plan to ensure sustainability and affordability. Committee are asked to note the requirements of the Financial Management Code and also note the assessment findings and recommended developments. And I'm happy to take any questions around that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. Just to start off with, I should have, and I apologise for not asking you to say what SIPFA is.
SIPFA is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting.
Thank you. I'm always...
Apologies for the acronym.
Yes, it was just the realisation that I don't think the full title is within the report. So I think that it would be helpful if full titles were always included in reports as well as the acronyms. I know that everybody around here is probably familiar with the acronym, but not everybody who's online necessarily is so. Does anyone have any questions or any comments that they want to make? Again, a dry but important report. So we'll go back to the recommendations, which are that the Performance Audit and Assurance Committee is asked to note the requirements of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance, the Financial Management Code, and note the assessment of compliance for the IJB and the Integration Joint Board, that is, and the developments recommended for progression. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on now to item 11, which is National Reports and Inspections Overview. And I think this is a combination of Marie and Nicola that will be bringing this forward.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a start and then I'll maybe hand over to Nicola for the inspection reports. So this is the usual regular update that we bring around any national reports that have been issued and any inspection reports that are ongoing and the recommendations flowing from them. So the table at 4.3 sets out that there have been 3 national reports issued since last reporting. One is the Local Government in Scotland Financial Bulletin for 24-25. The next one is the Integration Joint Board Financial Bulletin for 24-25 and the Annual Assurance and Risk Report for the same year. So the summary is included from 4.4 through to 4.7 for the Local Government in Scotland Financial Bulletin. Not surprisingly, that's setting out Scotland's councils are facing sustained and growing financial pressures, with funding increases not keeping pace with rising costs and demand, which leads to significant budget gaps. Financial sustainability is challenged as income and funding has not kept pace with inflation, and it mentions capital borrowing costs expecting to rise around council finances as well. Recommendations include improving clarity and comprehensiveness of reporting on savings performance and greater explanation of how budgets will be impacted by decisions being taken, and ensuring long-term financial plans are adequately considering risks to financial sustainability. The Integration Joint Board Financial Bulletin, starting at 4.8, this has been issued to all members of the IJB anyway, along with a briefing note, but the main points are set out in the report as well. So the IJB Financial Bulletin for 24-25 highlights a significantly deteriorating financial position across Scotland's IJBs, despite modest real terms funding increases. Total service costs reached around 12.5 billion 24-25. It also mentions reserve levels falling by 12% across IJBs, with many IJBs now holding little or no contingency reserves, leaving them exposed to financial risk. As I've already set out in our unaudited accounts, we are maintained our contingency reserves at the level set in our reserves policy. The report also emphasises that rising demand and demographic pressures and cost increases continue to outstrip funding, meaning that IJBs are having to work closely with partners to set realistic budgets. And again, it recommends about improving financial planning and reporting and considering significant service redesign, prioritisation and potential reductions to ensure long-term sustainability. The Audit Scotland Annual Assurance and Risk Report is set out from 4.10. And it highlights significant and ongoing financial pressures, not surprisingly, across councils and integration joint boards. Again, it sets out that rising demand, increase in costs and decline in reserves. It also identifies ongoing risks relating to leadership stability, workforce capacity and operational resilience. And overall, it concludes that a step change is required, with stronger leadership, clearer governance and difficult strategic decisions needed to deliver sustainable services. Overall, those three reports given very similar messages across the board. I might hand over to Nicola now for the inspection reports, and then I'm happy to take questions at the end on any of that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Nicola?
Thank you. So I'll chat through the Mental Welfare Commission inspection reports. We're doing a bit of a tag team this morning, then I'll hand over to Gail for the fostering adoption inspection report, if that's okay. So you'll see from the report that there's been 3 Mental Welfare Commission reports to Forth Valley Services since the last reporting period. The first one is in relation to Ward 1 at Forth Valley Royal Hospital. The inspectors at that point found that there was really positive feedback shared with them from service users, families and staff. They had identified that there was good therapeutic relationships evident and that there was a person-centred approach throughout the ward. They had highlighted that documentation was strong, as was a multidisciplinary team working. They did highlight that on one occasion there was one as required medication that wasn't fully authorised with the correct paperwork in place, and that's resulted in one recommendation in relation to the documentation around medication administration. Moving on then to Hope House at the Bellsdyke Hospital site. So again, the inspectors had strong feedback from service users and their family throughout the visit. They had witnessed good therapeutic activity taking place throughout the unit, which was evidently supporting recovery pathways. And they had also highlighted that there was an improvement noted since their last visit in relation to that medication consent in line with a previous recommendation. So they were happy to see that. There was 2 recommendations from that visit. The first one was to measure any impact of upcoming service changes to care and treatment delivery, and the second recommendation was to ensure that people are exploring and documenting individuals' views, in relation to any restrictive processes that are taking place in the unit. Finally, then, the Mental Welfare Commission also visited Ward 4, which is a specialist dementia unit within Forth Valley Royal Hospital. They had found that Ward 4 was a supportive care environment. They also picked up that a previous recommendation in relation to smoking arrangements was addressed and fully embedded now. And they highlighted that there was ongoing service development evident throughout the unit and described the service as a stable service. There were 5 recommendations that came out of that visit for Ward 4 to consider. The first one was in relation to auditing the do not attempt resuscitation documentation to ensure that people where there was power of attorneys or guardianships, guardians in place, that they had been consulted and that had been documented. They had recommended that care plans for people who were receiving continuous intervention, so an enhanced level of interactions with staff, that they had specific care plans and that they were updated appropriately. They had given a recommendation for care plans to be smart in the way that they were written, and for them to consider triggers that people may experience, and to review and to ensure that reviews included an evaluation of an impact of the interventions. They'd also recommended that an audit process for documentation and record keeping should be strengthened, and to ensure that risk assessments and care plans are more comprehensively completed following any instance that results in harm. So that's the 3 Mental Welfare Commission reports that's taken place. Again, happy to take any questions at the end, but I'll hand over to Gail just to finalise this section.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. So there's a recent inspection of adoption, fostering and adult continuing care services in February 26, resulting in an overall assessment of adequate grade 3 across all key indicators, including children and young people's wellbeing and leadership, for quality assurance and improvement. Inspectors confirmed that services are safe and meeting minimum standards, with clear strengths evident. However, improvements have not yet been embedded consistently and at the pace required. There was a total of 14 requirements set, all of which align with improvement actions already identified locally, providing confidence that the service is on track to meet all of the requirements, which we have now done. Strong leadership oversight is in place through established governance arrangements with clear accountability, quality assurance and performance tracking, supporting accelerated delivery over the next few months. This provides assurance both in short-term compliance with inspection requirements and longer-term embedding of sustainable improvements across the services, with continued focus on consistency, workforce development and partnership effectiveness. And just to say that I have a colleague, Monica O'Hanlon, who can answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Can I just ask a daft lassie question? First of all, it mentions a total of 14 requirements. How do requirements how are they distinct from recommendations in the other reports? Is it just a different wording of a different agency?
To answer that, requirements need to be met within a very short time scale. So that was by the 1st of April. Our report and recommendations come out at the end of February, so they had to be really quickly turned around, which means absolutely imperative. And then there were improvement actions identified as well, which will be progressed over this coming year.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I'd maybe just like to ask a wee bit about the document. I mean, it does appear in terms of the reports that Nicola listed that the only recommendations are really about documentation and about and not about the nature of the care and support that people are getting. So I think it's important to say that up front, that it is about ensuring, again, another dry issue, the documentation as opposed to the actual care. But it is important. So if there are no other questions or comments, we'll go back to the recommendations at section 2, and it's simply to consider and comment on the content of this report. Can we agree that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, given that we've been on the go now for some considerable time, I think we'll take a short break. I would note that, in fact, the forthcoming items 12, 13 and 14 are in fact still part of audit and assurance rather than clinical care governance. That's an error in the agenda. But we'll come to those after a short comfort break. So we take, is 10 minutes enough? Or, yeah, I'm seeing nods. So we'll take 10 minutes and we'll come back at 10 past 11. Okay, welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed your cups of tea, coffee, or whatever other comfort you found during the break. We're moving on to some more of the dry, boring reports. So item 12 is the Performance Audit and Assurance Committee Annual Assurance Statement. So we've been joined here by Joanne O'Sullivan. Sorry, I should have said first because they're online. Joanne O'Sullivan and Graham McLean, who'll be here to talk to item 17, but just for the sake of the live feed, so that people understand why there are new faces in the room. There's nothing sneaky or underhanded about it. So for the annual assurance statement, we'll have Ewan Murray presenting it.
Thank you, Chair. Annual assurance statements are prepared for IJB committees as part of IJB's governance framework. The assurance report covers the business covered by PAC over the last year, is essentially a factual report and will, subject to PAC's agreement, be remitted to the IJB. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ewan. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Hopefully, since we've all been here for all of these committee meetings, there's nothing in this report that's of any big surprise to us. But anybody got any questions or comments? No, so the recommendation is that the Performance Audit and Assurance Committee approve the annual assurance statement as attached to Appendix 1. Can we agree that? Agreed. Okay, we'll go on to item 13. Again, this is Ewan that will be bringing it forward, and it's the Integration Joint Board Strategic Risk Register.
Thank you, Chair. This report brings together some of the work I've been leading for the last few months around reviewing the IJB's approach to strategic risk, bringing forward what I'm snappily titling a strategic risk improvement plan, to set out what we need to do from both the content of this report and for the next few months, to review and modernise our approach to strategic risk, to modernise that, including use of the Council's Pantana reporting system, so we get our reporting around strategic risk as efficient as possible and support the risk owners to take ownership of reporting of their key elements of the strategic risk register. And I think really importantly, and this echoes some of the discussions we've already had this morning, the IJB strategic risk register is a risk of not delivering against the strategic plan. So there needs to be a dynamic process as we develop the new strategic plan to continue to review strategic risk alongside that process. So the plan that is set out aims to dovetail the processes of reviewing and simplifying our existing strategic risk register, but also keeping that dynamic review process. So what we come out with as we consider and agree the new strategic plan is a strategic risk register that truly reflects the risk of not delivering against that, given all of what we've discussed today around demand for services, financial pressure, and the overall environment we work within. The aim of that is not just to have a good-looking strategic risk register. It is to support the board to take risk-informed and risk-enabled decisions going forward and improve decision-making. That will be dovetailed with a need to consider how we reflect risk in reports that are brought to the board, and where we are bringing material decisions to the board, those risk sections within those reports should articulate how that assists mitigation of our strategic risks. Work ongoing around, based on the development session we recently had around risk appetite and tolerance statements, and incorporating those within refreshing our risk management framework, and that will be brought forward to PAC and IJB in the near future for agreement. I don't propose to go through every single element of the strategic risk register, but we have, myself with colleagues, have tried to simplify that a bit more, so members can get a true and clear and quite quick feel of the strategic risks and the control measures and the actions in play to assist in mitigating those. The presentation of that will hopefully improve as we modernise it using the Pentana system, and because the Pentana system then produces the reports in a standard format, and we, once getting this discussed and considered by the committee, that process of putting the strategic risk register into Pentana and turning our reporting framework around as efficiently as possible will get underway. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you, Ewan. I think it's we seem to be having so many different things coming up today about we're in the process of changing this, we're in the process of changing that, and it's always painful while it's being changed. But hopefully the end result will be an improvement in terms of our reporting. Just one quick question I wanted you to highlight. On page 266, under assurance, you've got the target risk rating marked as TBA. Wonder if you could clarify that.
For assurance. 4 point, just above 4.8.
Yeah, just above 4.8. My apologies. I forgot you're trying to do it online.
Thank you, Chair. That's an item where the target wasn't previously agreed, so that'll be one of the areas where we have a focused review of the risk in the coming period, and we'll look to agree a target risk rating as part of that process. Thank
you. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? We have Alison.
Hi, and I'm really supportive of all of this work, and it is just a request to join up with NHS Forth Valley on this. They have had a short life working group running for, I think, probably 6 to 9 months now, working on how they do their risk reporting and how they manage their strategic risks and what they're doing in that area. And I think there's probably a whole series of things that they can probably help with in terms of this is where we've got to in that process to help kickstart or give some additional support to accelerate some of the work that we're doing here.
Thank you, Alison. Just for assurance, I'm working closely with Vicky, the risk manager from NHS Forth Valley, and there's also a link to the council's risk coordinator in this work as well, because they have a responsibility to support the IJB in this work, but it's important we also keep a whole system frame to it all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Ewan. David?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to support that we have good working partnerships, as we've just alluded to from Alison. That's really good. I noticed that items 2, governance arrangements and partnerships, have reduced the risk since last reporting. What have we done to achieve that?
Thanks for the question, David. So obviously, in terms of going through and restructuring the risk register, we took the opportunity to review the risk rating and kind of sense check ourselves. And I guess for me, as not being in the partnership very long, I also brought in a bit of challenge around that in terms of is how that risk scored really where we are. So it was an outcome of that review rather than anything that changed in terms of really reassessing our level of risk in terms of these items, considering where we are and the control actions we have in place at the current point in time. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, who? Ian, sorry. I'm looking at the screen there to see who's got their hands up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, really. We had a really good session on risk recently, and we talked about risk appetite and the tolerances. I just wonder what the process is going to be for sort of getting to a final view on that, of the board's view on what our appetite is.
Thanks for the question, Ian. My intended approach is essentially to take the outcomes from that session and reflect on them and propose a suitable risk appetite and set of risk appetite and tolerance statements to the board. We could have endless workshops around it and end up having the same conversations over and over and again. I think there's some for me around getting to a point where you have something that's logical and sensible, and then testing that in practice for a period, and then having a review loop and adapting it based on the experience over a period of time. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I was pleased to hear as well that you'd mentioned that ongoing relationship with the new strategic plan as well, because it might be that depending on the content of that plan, some of the sort of the appetites, etc., and individual things might need to change to accommodate the work that we want to do. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
Thanks. Just to add to that point, logical and sensible, but I think it's really important that it communicates what we wanted to communicate, because these risk ratings are pretty subjective. So it's about what that means to people that the population in large, our constituents, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that comment. And just a comment I've made before, and I'll make it again, in terms of presentation. The up arrows and down arrows I find rather difficult in reports, because an up arrow can be good or it can be bad. So I think it needs to be a bit clearer as to whether it's a good movement or a bad movement. Just finding a way of doing that. I know it's included in the key, but it just is generally visually more understandable if it's and we've had the debate about red, amber and green in the past, so I won't go back to that one. So if no one has any further questions, then we'll go back to the recommendations. The Performance Audit and Assurance Committee is asked to note and agree the phased approach to reviewing and updating the Strategic Risk Register, risk management framework and interrelationship with the strategic planning process. Consider and comment on the revised format for IJB Strategic Risk Register, and note the continued inclusion of the Children and Families Corporate Risk Register to provide overview to the committee, pending finalisation of the integration scheme. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to, I think this is your final report, Ewan, for this section of the agenda. Item 14, which is Category 1 Responder Self-Assessment.
Thank you, Chair. So IJBs became Category 1 responders under the Civil Contingencies Act from March 2001. And given IJBs don't directly employ any staff, this responsibility can only reasonably be discharged through the operational delivery vehicle, that is the Health Social Care Partnership. There has been a review and a reflection on our ability and capability to be a Cat 1 responder over a period in time, including some reflective sessions last year based on the experiences of a power outage in Larbert at a point in time, and the operational challenges that brought. That informed and enhanced on-call arrangements, which we have recently implemented and will be subject to ongoing refinement and review a 6-month and 12-month point in time, and is accompanied by a series of training events for managers around those duties. The self-assessment was that's appended to the report was developed to be a concise basis that IJBs could self-assess their arrangements and their capabilities, and take that transparently through a governance committee or board itself, for a transparent record of their self-assessment. We have compiled that as concisely as possible. I think there is something around not making an industry out of things that don't need to be an industry, and being concise as possible. So that is appended for the committee's oversight and approval. Thank you.
As we work our way through the 461-page agenda, I do like to hear people talking about being as concise as possible. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this report? David?
Can I ask a quick question? Is related to Appendix 1, number 3. Does the HSCP have an up-to-date business continuity plan? If you cross-reference that to the table earlier on page 272, it says the risk and resilience and business continuity arrangements are not effective. How do these two sit together?
Thanks, David. So while business continuity plans are in place, there is some for me around ensuring they are match fit in terms of, are they, should a business disruption event happen, are they tested, are they up to date, do people understand them, and so on. And we have a wee bit to go on that. And it's an area we're continually reviewing and making sure business continuity plans exist and are of good quality, and people understand them, what they would have to do if they have to invoke them. So that statement and that slight juxtaposition is intended to reflect that while they exist, there is still improvement work to be done in that area. So it's really intended as an honest reflection of where we are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? In that case, we'll go to the recommendations in section 2. So we're asked to consider, discuss and take assurance from the Category 1 Responder Questionnaire as a self-assessment of arrangements. Can we agree that recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. So that takes us into the next section of the report, which is clinical and care governance. and agenda item 15, which is the Clinical and Care Governance Management Group report. And I think that's Nicola.
Thank you. Yep, so this is just the usual report that comes from the Clinical and Care Governance Management Group. So it takes the same structure as it normally takes. So you'll see in there that there's an update from our standing agenda items. Bearing in mind the comments about being concise, I'll just draw a couple of them to your attention that you may find interesting. So colleagues across primary care and secondary care have established a pathways oversight group. This is a really positive move. It's in response to a current risk that we've got due to a significant number, and that number is over 100 clinical pathways that are in place between primary and secondary care. The oversight group are initially focusing on developing a prioritisation matrix that they'll use to, prioritise the pathways that they're reviewing and streamlining, first of all, and that work will continue to progress. Something else that was highlighted through the subgroup reports was a variance in relation to various allied health professions, pathways and waiting lists. And it was discussed that actually this work was being taken forward through the Value-Based Health and Care Collaborative, which has got quite a lot of support surrounding it in terms of improvement work and project management. And they're looking to explore potential improvements and efficiencies. And I was quite pleased to see as well that the recent work that the committee have already heard about in relation to the adult weight management improvements that was made, the learning from that are going to be considered and threaded through the work that's taken forward. So that was positive news. In relation to adverse events and learning reviews, there were no learning reviews commissioned, but there were 15 new adverse events that were considered at the adverse event review group. One of them were escalated to the shared intelligence group, and that adverse event has been commissioned for a significant adverse event review, which will take place in due course. The management group also had a presentation from the lead officer for adult support and protection, and she presented a refreshed significant occurrence notification process for adult services, and that was approved by the management group. And it was worth noting that the updated procedure really strengthens the partnership's approach to identifying, reporting, analysing and learning from significant occurrences involving adults who use our services. And the process and the procedure will also work really closely and it'll interlink with the adverse event review group to ensure that the processes are as consistent as possible, but also that we're not duplicating efforts across the two processes. A 6-monthly report from that will be submitted to the management group for oversight, and that will again help us take any organisational learning and reinforce awareness of duty of candour procedures. During the management group, the head of community services also presented an 18-month improvement plan, and that was in relation to the care at home strategic inspection that committee have already had a presentation on. It's worth noting that the 18-month improvement plan that was presented not only detailed actions specific to the care inspectorate findings, but also improvements that were already underway that have been initiated locally. So all improvements have been collated into the one plan, which is helpful. Updates will be provided to the management group at regular intervals, and a closure report is expected to be presented in August 2027. You'll see in the report there's some details in terms of the foster and adoption inspection and the ADP strategic needs assessment, which committee have already heard about, so I won't go into any detail for that. One of the new risks that was highlighted to the management group relates to a reduced pool of out-of-hours GPs, and that was raised because it's a potential risk if there's a need for somebody to be detained under the Mental Health Act, because we require a medical profession to be able to do that. Mitigations are being explored at present. That includes, an on-call system for GPs that's in place at the moment, but also the out-of-hours team are working very closely with the mental health team to look at the psychiatric emergency plan, which really details how people access mental health services both in and out hours. So that plan is being updated at the moment, so there's a real potential there to influence how that looks and to ensure that there's
consistent access to services when required 24 hours a day. In terms of future steps, we have undergone a review of subgroups and chairs, and we're just, strengthening our processes in relation to the management group. An updated terms of reference will be taken to the senior leadership team for sign off, and details of any changes will be included in the next management group report, just for committee's information during the next cycle. So I'll stop there, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. I have one question I'd like to address. The reduced pool of out-of-hours GPs, is that a temporary issue, or is that going to be an ongoing situation?
It's looking like it's going to be an ongoing situation. So we have GPs who are, quite happy to work in out of hours at the weekends, but during the week overnight, it's having an impact on their normal work pattern the next day. So we have less people who are, keen to be involved in that Monday to Friday overnight kind of rota. It is being covered more now. There's a clinical lead within out of hours who's a GP, so actually we're relying more on the clinical lead to cover the Monday to Friday areas. But as I say, we are looking at how we can strengthen that, and we're doing that whole system. So there'll be a paper that goes to the joint SMT between Falkirk and Clacks and Stirling to consider the impact of that.
I think Tom wants to come in on that one as well.
Yeah, for me, we have just made a decision at the end of the beginning of this week to embark on a recruitment campaign in relation to bank general GPs and also directly appointed GPs. Now that's specifically in relation to the walk-in centre, but is of course that capacity is also intended to support the out-of-hours service as well, which we recognise is struggling. But that's a programme we hope will yield dividends. But I also have to manage expectations by saying this comes at a time in which the market has become increasingly difficult to recruit GPs from. The new investment money, every board across the country is now recruiting GPs because of the investment monies, and they've all got their walk-in centre as well. So we have to say that we're doing that, but it will remain a challenge to be able to be confident about being able to do that.
Thank you for that assurance. Nicola wants to come back on that one.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it was just to be clear as well that, there's advanced nurse practitioners and senior advanced nurse practitioners within the out-of-hours services who actually undertake the majority of assessments. So, the service as a whole is not at risk. People can come and get those assessments. It's purely the Mental Health Act detention part, which is a really small number throughout the year where the risk lies. So I suppose it's just to provide assurances that people will still have access to out-of-hours and they'll get timely assessments as they have been doing. It's just that GP element for the Mental Health Act assessment that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it may be a small number, but it can be very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just very interested, Nicola, around the reduced working week. I understand, obviously, it reduces capacity, but on the ground as such, has there been any challenges even around things like rota management? I get when you've got a 24-hour service and less available hours, it can actually cause some challenges in covering all the available hours that's needed.
Yeah, it's the implementation has gone more smoothly than what we would have hoped it would be. So actually, it's been quite positive so far. I checked in with all the teams recently, and there's been no issues. It's been highlighted from any of the services, which is positive. Just also to say that the funding attached to reduced working week has been confirmed, and people will get the back pay for any of the losses. And Marie has been working closely with the Deputy Director of Finance and NHS to ensure that happens. So we have assurances across the services that there's no identified risks at present, which is good news.
Thank you, Nicola. It's reassuring to hear, because it could have been something that impacted on us significantly potentially. So it's really good to hear that it's been minimal impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Nicola. Any other questions or comments? have Claire Chapman. I think you want to come in
Thank
on that
you.
one.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise a point perhaps for consideration moving forward. So I note that the care at home inspection is within the report, and I think that's, is equally important in terms of those action points. However, I think it would be good in future, it might be good to consider in future how we're quality assuring, I suppose, our care at home services internally and externally as part of our care at home redesign, just to draw a bit of parity around actually measuring outcomes for people and ensuring that we do have that clear frontline intelligence to surround our care at home services. So I think for consideration, we'll be looking at that as part of the care at home redesign and how we do that bit of quality assurance that potentially could be reported within this report moving forward, and quite clearly linking to those inspection outcomes as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Claire. I think we're all very well aware of the importance of the care at home arrangements, and looking at that and the redesign of that is going to be a big issue. Any other comments or questions? In that case, we'll go back to the recommendations, which are that we are asked to consider and comment on the updates provided within the report. I think we can agree that we have done that. Okay, thank you. We go on now to item 16 on the agenda, which is urgent and unscheduled care. And I think Caroline's going to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides assurance on the development and implementation of the whole system urgent and unscheduled care plan, which was endorsed in March 2026 at the NHS Board. In terms of the background of this report, the urgent and unscheduled care continues to face significant pressure, and we discussed that previously earlier on in the agenda when we were discussing the performance report. This has led to high occupancy rates and delays in discharge, increasing risk for patients. In response, partners have developed a whole system plan aligned to national priorities such as home first and discharge without delay. In terms of progress, shifting the balance of care model has contributed to measurable improvements, including reduced delayed discharges and shorter hospital stays. There's also improved trends in occupancy and flow, supporting performance improvements across the system. The plan itself is built around 8 core pillars, including improving emergency department flow, which was something that we had discussion on earlier on, strengthening discharge processes, expanding hospital at home, and improving data and digital visibility. These are being delivered in a phased and interdependent way, recognising that sustainable change requires both system and cultural shifts. In terms of implications, there's been a 2.027 million transfer of non-recurring funding to support embedding the model. However, long-term sustainability will require recurring investment. Without this, there's a risk of reverting to more expensive hospital-based care and adversely impacting on whole system flow. In terms of the workforce implications, there's strong staff support for the direction of travel. However, there is pressures in community services, particularly around workload intensity, and this is currently being addressed around workforce planning and the forthcoming care at home redesign, which is currently being consulted on. In terms of risks, to mitigate the risks, system flow and capacity, that patient harm and prolonged stays, it's important to note that failure to sustain the model would increase the risk exposure across the system. In terms of this plan, there's been wide engagement with staff, partners, patients and carers, and the quality impact assessment which accompanies this report shows positive impacts, particularly for older people and those supported at home. In summary, the report demonstrates early positive system impact, a clear whole system approach, and the importance of sustaining investment and delivery to maintain progress. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, around the report.
Thank you, Caroline. I think it's always well worth reminding ourselves that the most important thing is helping to sustain people in their own homes. And that's partly what some of this discussion is about. Does anyone have any questions or any comments? Oh, you're getting off easily today, Caroline. I think people are maybe keen to move on to the more exciting business that we've got on the agenda today. If there are no questions or comments, the committee is asked to note the progress in implementing the whole system urgent and unscheduled care plan and the evidence of early system impact. Consider whether the arrangements described provide sufficient assurance that key risks relating to system capacity, patient harm and financial sustainability are being appropriately managed. Note the approved non-recurring funding transfer in 26-27 to support the embedding of the shifting the balance of care model and the intention that recurring funding proposals will be brought forward as part of the fully developed plan. Are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to further reports on that, the funding arrangements there. So we now move on to the penultimate item on our agenda, which is item 17. And we've kept the best till last, I think. This I'm hoping is not going to be as dry and boring as some of our other items that have been on the agenda. So we'll pass over to Graham McLean and Joanne O'Sullivan to give us a presentation on Keep Well Service Annual Report 24-25.
Thank you, Chair. Before I hand over to Joanne O'Sullivan, who's going to take us through the deep dive into the Keep Well service, I just thought I'd introduce myself really, because I haven't been here before. So I'm the Graham McLean 11 Well lead. I'm relatively new to Falkirk, been here since the middle of August last year. With regards to the report, that was written before I came into Keep Well came into the service area. So Joanne's obviously had sight of that and is going to present it because she presented it to Clinical Care Governance as well. So it gives us that consistency to it. Keep Well came in to the Living Well portfolio around about January this year as well. So it's relatively new. And it also forms a kind of cluster of services that kind of deploy kind of preventative early intervention approaches and health improvement approaches as well. And as you'll be aware, Keep Well is a Forth Valley-wide hosted service, so it covers the whole of the Forth Valley footprint as well. So again, the annual report, it's really for Joanne to present that to as well. So happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation as well. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Joanne.
Thank you. Thanks, Graham. I'm really pleased to present the annual report for our Keep Well service for 24-25 to this committee. You have a cover report, the committee with a couple of recommendations within that, and you also have the full annual report in your papers should you need some light bedtime reading as well. I have provided a slide deck where I will outline what the service does and how we work, and then some of our key outcomes across the year. And again, just noting that this service is a delegated responsibility for partnership on behalf of both partnerships for Forth Valley as well. So next slide, please. That's all right. My teenagers would say it's lagging. It's lagging. That's what they would say to me. Perfect. So the purpose of the Keep Well service is essentially to improve the rate of health improvement in our population for those who are more at risk of identifiable sort of ill health. And you may have heard of a term called the inverse care law, which was coined back in the 1970s. Essentially that people who live in more deprived communities, thank you very much, thank you. People who live in more deprived communities tend to suffer worse health across a range of indicators and also don't necessarily access health services, health and social care services as well either. So we have what's called that kind of inequalities gap for people. I've outlined key areas that we support. We detect early signs of disease, diabetes, heart disease and cancers, for example. We particularly speed up the diagnosis to treatment pathway for patients, and we actually are able to, for example, undertake BP monitoring at home for clients across 7 days and provide that information into primary care. And we're able to do testing for diabetes and for cholesterol as well. And we generally promote positive lifestyle changes with people to ensure that the onset of conditions is obviously minimised. Next slide, please. Just to highlight that my team is comprised of mainly nurses, and we have one occupational therapist and one life coach also within our service as well. And so the way we work is that we target clients through lettering, through GP practice lists, where we're trying to target people in the 40 to 65 year age band, and people who are living either in council tax A and B or in the more deprived Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. I'll try not to use too many acronyms. So we are trying to target people who are living in the more deprived communities. People opt in, so they receive a letter and then they phone in the service to actually make that appointment. We provide the core part of the service is that we provide a very holistic health assessment to people that includes physical and mental and social elements of their health. It's very person-centered. It takes about an hour to work through with our team, and we actually receive really positive feedback from patients across the board in terms of how well they feel listened to and supported by our nurses. We undertake life coaching, as I've highlighted on the slide, and we have a specialist occupational therapist who works to support people to stay in work should they actually find that they're, feeling unwell, and keep them in work. Because unlike perhaps some of us might feel work is a stress, work can actually have that really positive improvement to people and improve their self-esteem going forward. We are set now under the clinical governance structure within the partnership, and we support a range of clinical governance groups for that. And it's also important to just highlight we have a very comprehensive clinical management system for a wide range of evaluation and data that we actually collate. Next slide, please. I'm conscious of time. I'll try to be concise. We reach our clients using a range of innovative ways. So not just through GP practice lists, but we reach into, for example, accessing people who might be homeless through community cafes, through our criminal justice services, and through our ADP supports as well. We have a young adult health assessment we are able to provide to that small group of clients who might be, for example, sort of 16 to 19 to 26 years old. We also, I'm very proud to speak to you about our Thrive to Keep Well partnership programme, which is a 16-week programme we developed probably back in 2018 that provides people with mild to moderate mental health challenges an opportunity to understand mental health and how that kind of can be managed. And then we bring in a range of partners for the clients to actually start to learn how they can improve their goals, improve their outlook in life. And some of our outcomes show that people are coming off antidepressants, for example, moving into volunteering, moving into employment, thinking about, moving onto a college course and really improving their own lives and their families' lives. I will just take a moment to take a plug for this. We have a celebration event that's happening on Tuesday morning at 12 noon for our Thrive to Keep Well partnership programme, where you can learn a little bit about the impact of that programme on participants. I will skip over the rest of those key areas of work just to move forward, please. So a little bit of detail. This is quite small. I appreciate you won't be able to see this. The slides will be available after the meeting. These are the areas that are covered in our men's health assessment, as you can see, clinical issues, personal, financial as well, and we cover men's health screening areas particularly as well. We use a coronary heart disease risk score, which is validated, and we also do bloodborne virus testing should that be required, and we do counselling on that for clients as well. Our women's health assessment is similar, but covers issues around, for example, breast screening and cervical screening as well. So moving on, we have a wide range of outcomes that are analysed, which we break down by local authority area and then by tax council tax banding as well. And I wanted to just highlight that for 24-25, that we're actually really proud to see 49% of men and 51% of women seen through a health assessment. That's a very, very strong lean, because it's typically often men that don't actually access health services. Those are the other parameters that we break down, and I'll move on to the next slide because you'll be interested to see the outcomes now. So we do see approximately 8,500 total contacts per year, and of those, that includes initial health assessments, then follow-up at 3 months as well, and then other appointments out with that. But just to highlight that we saw 2,700 just over initial health assessments, which, as I highlight to you, take approximately an hour over that year. And we have a really strong a strong lean towards those who are living in more deprived areas as well. I've given you a breakdown there of the numbers for Falkirk, for Stirling and for Clackmannanshire, and then wider outreach partners. So we have noticed, just to note to the committee, we had some lack of staff capacity within Clackmannanshire in this annual year, but we've actually rectified that for subsequent years. So I think we should have that typical even split of sort of 51% for Falkirk, 49% or so for Clacks and Stirling going forward. Next slide, please. In terms of our outcomes, this is what we're all about. A key area to highlight to you is that 624 of all of our initial health checks that we had were actually, those clients were actually diagnosed with one or more physical health condition. Thereby, we were then able to inform the GP moving forward. Clients were then able to either move on to appropriate medication or have a medication review, and thereby we're actually stemming the tide of any conditions worsening. I've given you an outline of key conditions that we've identified. The predominant ones are actually pre-diabetes and hypertension as well. I'll move on, please. Thank you. Just a couple of other highlights for you. We have identified over 300 people who were hazardous drinkers, and we use a particular validated score to understand that with clients, and then we undertake something called an alcohol brief intervention to support patients to reduce or stop their intake. There's a strong strategic drive now around obesity. You may be aware of work going on across Forth Valley in that space, and we've seen a significant volume of patients with a high BMI. You'll be well aware that obesity is a risk factor for increasing cancers and diabetes and heart diseases as well. So we're pleased to say that we've actually supported over 200 people to lose over 5% of their body weight, which then actually creates a really strong reduction in any long-term health risks as well. And we're very proud of some recent work that we've undertaken in identifying people with diabetes using a blood test for a particular marker, and then moving on to counselling people for that. So that again is reducing any long-term condition load in terms of further secondary and tertiary services as well. I'll move on, please. Thank you. Just sort of lastly, in terms of some of our outcomes, we also encourage uptake of national screening programmes, which I'm sure you'll be aware are absolutely crucial, again, to preventing long-term health conditions. We're seeing a really strong lean for our cervical screening in Forth Valley. The uptake is 84% across women, and our Scottish average is much lower than that. So the other two are synonymous with our Scottish averages. We have seen a sort of a lower figure for our abdominal aortic aneurysm screening, which is a screening program for men, potentially at risk of that. And I think we are looking to probably support some wider work to increase the uptake of that particular screening program. I'll just move on to the penultimate slide. I wanted to highlight again our occupational therapist within the service who works and receives referrals from a kind of pathways of different support services, but crucially, if a client is struggling to stay in work due to ill health, we've actually seen that service support 67% of those clients to retain and stay in work, and then another 22% to actually return back into work as well, which has implications for clients' finances and, as I said, well-being across the board. So I think in summary, I just wanted to outline to you the key areas that we feel we make a difference. We take pressure away from primary care and other secondary healthcare services as well. We are a service that is able to respond to new developments and client groups. We have responded to delivering the Scottish direction recently for annual health checks offered to people with a learning disability. I'd be pleased to present that additional report to this committee at another time. We identify people early, and as I've highlighted in that point there, 40% of people have been typically referred to their GP and highlighted that they have actually a condition or something that can be minimised. And we are taking innovative approaches to reducing coronary heart disease risks. We're working with our innovation team within NHS Forth Valley at the moment on a Clackmannanshire test of change approach for that as well. So the prize that you get now is to see a short video which gives you a little bit more detail of what a health assessment involves, how a patient has found that helpful to them, and then some information about our Thrive to Keep Well programme. So we'll watch the video just now, please, and then I'm very happy to take any further questions.
Hi, I'm Alison DL and I'm the Keep Well team leader. Keep Well is a community-based early intervention service providing person-centred, health-focused assessments. Keep Well targets those most vulnerable in society to help reduce inequalities.
Hi, my name's William and this is my Keep Well story. So on my initial appointment I was in with the nurse Catherine. I was there for about an hour. She explained a lot about weight management, about prostate cancer, about cholesterol and about diabetes. She was very good and made me feel at ease. She took my weight, she checked my cholesterol levels, she checked me for diabetes and my blood pressure. So after my results, I decided that I was going to do something about it. I started going to the gym, started watching what I was eating, healthily eating, and I've had a further 2 assessments. I was 20 stone 6, don't mind saying that, and since mid-February till now I've lost 3 stones and 6 pounds. Since I've found that my mood swings are a lot better, my mental health is so much better. I also feel that I'm a lot healthier within myself. I'm able to keep up with my grandkids, and also that just clothes themselves, fitting the clothes is so much better. I've actually went down 3 jean sizes. The service is something that I would say is required. within today's modern society.
I came across the Thrive course through the ETU, and I really wanted to come on the course to give myself some kind of identity as I'm not just a carer, not just a mum, but also as a person. Thrive is a community group. It's a 16-week group that covers life skills, mental well-being, stress, and helps you to feel good about yourself to then go on and get employment. So when people first come to the Thrive course, they're really nervous, and over the space of the 16 weeks, you can see them just blossoming within themselves. And we get to do a big grand finale, and we have a graduation where the Lord Provost comes, and where the ladies can actually celebrate how they began and how much they've grew. So after Thrive, everybody's got a lot more confidence, they've got more self-esteem, they've got the ability to go out there and look for jobs or find the career that they want to do and chase that dream. That it can boost your self-esteem, your confidence, and it can make you thrive. That's why it's called Thrive.
I alwast want to applaud at the end of that. I think that's a very uplifting video and a very uplifting presentation. We talk often at the committee about prevention and early intervention, and that is exactly what this is about, quite clearly, and it seriously is very, very exciting. Can I just ask a couple of questions? First of all, you mentioned that you managed to reduce the time from diagnosis to treatment. I wonder if you could just say a wee bit more about how that is in practice.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of examples of that would be that we are able to actually, so for example, if a nurse identifies someone has got raised blood pressure, we actually have an approach using something called the Florence Blood Pressure Monitoring System. Nicola, be aware of that. Our nurses have been trained in training a client to be able to undertake that on a 7-day basis. The client will go home, measure the blood pressure, take the record for 7 days, and that is a valid record to then be able to present to primary care. So we're able to do that immediately with the client in front of us, and then provide and take that information to GP. So it just speeds everything up. And similarly, for example, within our pre-diabetic and diabetes identification program, there and then at the appointment we can take a small blood draw, send that off immediately to our phlebotomy service. That'll come back fairly swiftly, and we'll have that result. So again, it's just sort of speeding up that diagnosis and be able to inform the GP about that. So it almost bypasses, a couple of those examples bypass the need for primary care intervention at that diagnostic stage.
Thank you. I think it's Graham wanting to come in again. You've got your light on still. Oh, no, you weren't. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else? I've got some other questions, but I'll give others an opportunity first. Tom, would you like to ask any questions or make a comment?
If I can make a comment, and I suppose it's and it may be occurring to people in terms of where does some of what we do align here, because health improvement, for example, there is what might be perceived as an overlap here in terms of some of the areas of activity and some of the areas of focus. But actually, there is a legitimate distinction between the two things. But I'll come to the alignment in a second, because obviously the health improvement service is a strategic population level, system-wide campaigns, training, specialist programs kind of service, whereas what a Living Well service is about front door, person-facing, advice, triage, signposting, etc. But the opportunity remains there in terms of how we see this as a whole system and a whole system that's able to impact. And so if you therefore see that triangle between primary care, health improvement and living well as a potentially very powerful vehicle in relation to prevention and early intervention. So this is something that at the moment and in the way we are configured keeps these things all relatively separate strategically and in terms of the organisation. But we would want to be seeing those things coming closer into alignment so that the population understands the distinction, the population understands the various front doors to things, but we also optimise the opportunity that might be there. So it really was just a comment in case anyone was slightly wondering about that, but also that actually we are mindful of it and we want to make some inroads into that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Do you want to come in on that, Joanne?
Thanks, Tom, for that comment. Yes, absolutely agree. I think the distinction probably with our Keepwell service is that it has a very clinical lean to it, which gives it the autonomy to, I guess, guide primary care and undertake those early clinical decisions. And then primary care GPs are assured of those, I suppose, moving forward. However, I think, Tom, probably just feeding into your comment there, we very much rely on our health improvement services for exactly what you've outlined there. So, for example, around what supports are available, what lifestyle supports are available in the community for our nurses to then signpost our clients too. So the physical activity supports that our health improvement service will be, influencing our mental health supports across third sector and, across our primary care and front door services as well, and our ADP services as well. So, and also thinking about the importance that our health improvement service has in workforce development across all of our partners, adds strength to what we as our Keepwell service are able to then refer our client back out to. We're not able to be seeing people on a weekly basis. We see them for that intense support and a couple of other appointments, but then it's very important that we have that other wider lifestyle support base out within the health and social care partnership. So it's a vital working partnership, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think you have something more to say on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Tom touched on it about the potential of living well. I think there is something, and Joanna and I are already talking about this, about how we deploy some of those approaches and scale up elements of that within that front door model that we'll be looking at later in the year. And I hear a lot of conversations this morning about the community part of that. And how we can use health improvement approaches data in the approach to that to have good outputs from that first entry point into the system without delay. We can output to wherever we are in terms of health improvement or third sector or elements of primary care that Tom spoke about, and how we can integrate those into a full system, whole system model. It's almost a flow-based model, so that what we're trying to do from a preventative point of view is at the earliest opportunity we output to wherever we can and have flow into that, so that people can access that at the earliest opportunity. I think being new here and part of the Living Well thing, I find it quite exciting, because I think Living Well should eventually become the heart of everything we do and the approaches around that, which isn't necessarily just about, there's two parts to Living Well. Is that there's a digital platform that people engage in, it's a self-assessment around functional ability. But the second layer of that is actually about a whole system approach, which is around working with people around their strengths and promoting their own independence and taking more responsibility for their own health and well-being, but also that we offer an infrastructure around them so they can access that without delay. So I would totally agree with Tom. We really have an infinite possibilities around Living Well, and I'd be keen to come back at some point and talk more about it once we've evolved the thinking around it more strategically and joined up all the elements of the partnership and wrapped it around it really. So, and would welcome more conversation around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think I can speak for everybody to say we'll be more than happy to have you come back and tell us more. I think I now have Councillor Jim Flynn.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I've 3 points to make, but first of all, I'd like to say well done. It's a very positive report, and it's good to see the activity that's been done, because anything, as we know, that prevents any long-term issues is good. The first one I would like to mention, some years ago, I used to do talks and promote smoking cessation products, and at that time, smoking was 25% of the population there. It's now about 10.6%, so there's been good progress there. I noticed on the forms that were shown online here, and when should I visit the GP, specialist nurse, ED, they always say, what do you drink? Do you smoke? But never ever does anyone say, do you vape? Now, vape is, to me, is something that is a serious issue that's going to develop. There's already some clinical evidence that vaping can seriously harm you long term. So 2 points to that. First of all, perhaps you could encourage people to ask, do you vape, when they go to these different situations? But more importantly, what can we do to give knowledge and encourage youngsters from a very early age, up to teenage and beyond, to stop smoking, using perhaps social networks rather than traditional methods that you would use with adults, because I don't think it would reach these vulnerable people. That's my first question.
Do you want to answer that
Yes,
now, and then we'll go on to your second question?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, you're absolutely right. I've previously actually managed our stop smoking service for Forth Valley, so we are pleased to see that the tobacco consumption rate is going down. But yes, vaping is on the increase. The evidence is still needing to be drawn in, but we will and do ask about vaping. So if that's not clear on our assessment form, we are actually asking about vaping. So that's absolutely fine. And I agree with you. It's a huge challenge now with young people. I actually live down in Glasgow, and I'm on my parent council committee, and we discuss that quite regularly. There is a programme. It's called the Social Influence Programme. That has been used across schools over the past few years, and what it does, it actually uses takes the students and asks them to complete surveys anonymously about what their habits are around smoking, around drinking, and around other, let's just say, other activity they shouldn't probably be doing, and that's all anonymous. And in fact, it works to look at what do you think all your peers are doing, and then, well, actually here are the results. Your peers are not all smoking, all doing things they shouldn't be, all drinking, and it works to do that kind of education approaches with young people. Our health improvement service also has been involved in work across the education setting on vaping. So it's an ongoing challenge, and I guess I could link you in with somebody to give you a further update if that was required.
That'd be useful. No, thank you for that. Thank you very much. My second last question, Chair. Maybe you've touched it in the presentation, but I don't think so. Local pharmacy is a valuable resource. What are you doing to work in harmony, not with all the things you mentioned, but some of the things that they can very much help with? Is there any ongoing plan with that?
So yes, once again, I suppose we don't link very strongly with pharmacies. We would in terms of stop smoking support. So local pharmacies are certainly a go-to, a first line of approach for stop smoking support. And actually, community pharmacists have been trained in giving brief intervention advice to people who want to give up smoking, and opportunities for nicotine replacement therapy, patches, that kind of thing, are available at pharmacies as well. Another sort of other work that we've peripherally been looking at is actually around the new weight loss drugs. But we didn't receive funding into Forth Valley. That hasn't come into NHS as yet. And at the moment, patients are paying privately to actually receive those GLP-1 reduction drugs. But that could be something that we might get involved in the future.
Okay, thank you. Final question, Chair. You touched on bowel screening, which I think is a very, very good idea. Now, it might not be in your remit, but I think about 4 or 5 years ago, the Scottish Government cut back annual bowel screening because I used to get, well, not a nice letter, but a letter asked me to do something once a year. That stopped about 4 or 5 years ago. And to me, that's completely counterproductive. Now, it's not in your remit locally, but I just wonder what the ongoing national picture might be. Thanks.
Thank you again. It isn't exactly my remit, but I am a little bit aware. Bowel screening is actually managed at national level.
Yeah.
There are some screening programs that are managed here at local Forth Valley level. Those include diabetic eye screening and cervical screening are actually managed within our public health department in NHS Forth Valley. Bowel screening is managed through NHS Scotland nationally. The simple answer to your question about frequency is actually a cost effectiveness piece, really, in that I guess a very erudite committee of physicians have looked at the data as to what the impact and improvement is if you take the bowel screening samples on an annual basis, and how many people with cancer you then identify, and that kind of sort of reduction in bowel cancer frequency. They take that and they analyze it, and then they look at the potential for, well, actually, the cost effectiveness isn't so high on an annual basis. So my understanding is I think it's been dropped to 3 yearly for bowel screening. I would have to double check that. So it's actually a kind of formula and an approach that's looked at national level for the frequency of when people get that little tube through the door.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I don't know if it is 3 yearly, because certainly I haven't seen anything for 4 or 5 years. No, thank you for your answers, and thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Alison is next.
Yes, thank you. I've got 2 questions. So the first one is actually about your target clients. So there's lots and lots of information there about who they are, how you get them, and what they actually look like. What I don't know is how you decide what that target customer base is, that client base, and are the people you're getting the people you actually want, or is there a mismatch there? So that is kind of question 1. And is there something that we should be doing that looks at a different client base, or are you exactly where you want to be? The second one is really about how do we make the evidence base stronger about this, because you've given us some really lovely things about some patient stories. You have given us some outcomes about referrals back into GPs, but there is ultimately an economic and a public health impact of some of those. It'd be lovely to see it flowing through the system so you can actually start to say what that looks like, because as we go forward, we're going to have to prove that this population health is delivering value, and those questions will get tougher in years to come. Now, I completely back what we're doing, but I think building that evidence base as we go forward and building a more robust evidence base about the whole system impact of this would be really, really helpful. And I think we're probably getting to the stage with the work that Jennifer's doing in public health that we should hopefully begin to be able to do that. So those were the 2 points I wanted to raise.
Thank you, Alison. I mean, our client base was decided back when the program started. It actually started probably nearly 20 years ago, following Scottish Government funding. And we are, I think, the only health board now that's continued the Keep Well service. Other health boards have reduced how it's actually organised or brought it back into primary care. We feel that we are deliberately targeting people living in the either council tax A and B and high, well, the sort of CIMID areas 1 and 2, and we do as much as we can to have that positive lean towards that target group, and then our outreach programs, we feel, also boost that approach as well. We feel we've got a very strong track record in terms of the more deprived communities coming into the program. Yes, of course, we do actually get more sort of affluent populations and what you would term the worried well coming in for a health check as well. We stretch and reach as much as we can to ensure that client base has brings in those clients that are living in the more deprived communities. I don't know if that answers your question for area 1.
Yes and no. It wasn't the answer I was expecting, actually. So I didn't realise that it came from that 20-year-old kind of setting up of the service. So for me, there's a piece that comes back that says, given where we are now, is that the right focus for the service now, given where we are? And would you want to use those services in a different way? It was purely almost a market-based question that says, are we hitting the right people given the challenges we face as Falkirk today? That was purely all it was. There was nothing else behind it. Have we got the right demographics? Are we getting enough right old people? Should we getting more young people? All of those elements of it, and that probably fits into how does this fit into the wider strategy, which is maybe why Tom's got his hand up as we go into the strategy piece. So there's maybe a piece about how do we align this service back into that wider strategy piece and the customer base that it is serving. That was purely where the question came from, but it was a very, very interesting answer. So thank you. So yes, it did. It gave quite a lot in terms of what I was looking for.
Could I just add in? I know Graham wants to come in, but in fact, this actually feeds into another comment that you'd made earlier. We actually have recently developed an older adult health assessment. So that would be for, you can't really think about functionality by age. You get some 60-year-olds that aren't great on their feet, and you get some 85-year-olds that are absolutely super and still swimming. But we have got an older adult health assessment, which we've designed in conjunction with some of our NHS Forth Valley colleagues, including our frailty team as well. And that is, we're actually going to start work with the Living Well platform to look at, it's all about how we can sustain people within what they're doing in their terms of activities of daily living, and maintain and sustain that as much as possible for people living in the community, and prevent any sort of decline in their functionality. So we have just recently launched that, and that's some work that we're working strongly together on now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Did you want to come in on that point as well?
I suspect Tom might come in on what I'm going to mention.
That was where I was going next.
Sorry.
Okay, Tom, I know you've been putting some information in the chat that you maybe want to bring forward.
Yeah, firstly, just in the passing, that kind of strategic piece I referred to, and that strategic alignment thing I spoke to about earlier, is of course where we'll pick up some of the questions that were posed there. I just wanted to just, I don't know if correct is the right word, but just clarify the situation with the GLP-1s, which is we do actually have that in Forth Valley. There was an initiated pilot programme that started this year. Now, it's a targeted programme with a limited number of patients, and that's to test pathway safety for those who have complex underlying conditions or individuals for whom weight loss is a significant requirement in order to undertake some treatment. So there is a pilot program in place. Marie is sitting next to you, and money has been identified and set aside in relation to supporting the continued cost of that. But it was just in case I either misunderstood what was said in relation to GLP-1s in Forth Valley, but for the benefit of the meetings, understanding that that is in Forth Valley and it's been undertaken at the moment.
Thank you for that clarification, Tom. Marie, did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, it was just to confirm in the back of Tom's comments that we did have test to change money in 25/6, and there's additional reserves been identified of £500,000 for future test to change coming forward around GLP-1s as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think I now have Roger.
Thanks, Anne. And just it may be in the papers and I've missed it, so apologies if I have. The OTs, very aware of the mental health benefits of working for so many people, and what I feel is minimal input could support somebody to remain in work or get back to work. How these people that the OT is supporting found them, what's the referral process there for people to get to see the OT?
Yes, so we have a band 6 occupational therapist. It was one whole-time equivalent at the time of this report. She receives majority of her referrals through the Keep Well nurses, actually. However, you might be aware there's a matrix of that kind of support available in Forth Valley. There's also a service called Working Health Service, which is available to businesses that don't have an occupational health service in them. They're able to actually refer directly into a small team in NHS Forth Valley for that service as well. We also are well linked in with our integrated mental health services as well. So we might receive in a referral from a mental health nurse, for example, into our occupational therapist for that particular piece. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And David, I think you're next on my list.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's a very interesting topic we've just been listening to, and there's far too many questions really to ask today. But if I can ask maybe one or two and then make a comment on how much does the service cost, and how do you assess the sustainability of the clinical gains you make? I think from listening to my GP, I think getting the category of patients into a GP service at 1 and 2 is particularly difficult. I mean, I think the Scottish Government gave some money out recently, and the uptakes were mainly from 3, 4 and 5, and 1 and 2 didn't appear. So the fact that you're capturing that population seems an excellent way forward. And I think there's also a real opportunity here to have more joined up thinking between the strategic direction which we're going and the activities that you're pursuing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just had to quickly check my balance sheet. The service for that year is approximately £650,000 per annum. Majority staff costs. We have some requirement for supplies as well, clinical supplies. So it is always notoriously difficult for me and public health consultants, Alison might make a comment here, for us to prove, I guess, the kind of cost effectiveness of public health and early interventions. It's really, really difficult. It's an ongoing challenge. So what there are available, some evidence base around, for example, cost savings of saving around kind of people with diabetes, over a 10-year period. And, if we reduce that diabetic population, then we think about the the impact on drugs, sort of prescription costs, or further into secondary care costs that might be charged. So there are some evidence-based pieces on those cost reductions for some long-term conditions, but it's usually a kind of 10 to 15 year looking ahead, unfortunately. So it's not an easy calculation to make, and therefore it can feel difficult for us to kind of pursue wanting to increase the size of the service or the length of the service.
I think that picks up on the point I was making earlier on, that prevention is actually quite difficult to measure the value of. But I would have thought that given you've had 20 years of this service, there might have been some further research or the possibility of, in the future, looking at trying to measure against a group who have not had access to the service.
Well, it's very pertinent. You've just highlighted that, Councillor Hannah, because we're actually just beginning some work with Stirling University. I should have actually. I think my mind is a little bit befuddled just now. We're undertaking a piece where we're looking at the longitudinal impact of our service, and we're going to look at the data that we have across the service for the past, I think, 15 years or so, 13, 15 years, where we feel the quality of that data is better. That's going to be taken anonymously and analysed at Stirling University for the impact and outcomes of that. There then is an opportunity for a second phase of that work to do a comparison with a cohort of similar people who didn't receive Keep Well. So we should be able to have that information in due course. Apologies, I should have actually had that at the top of my mind.
You had a great deal of information to pass on. So I think the fact that you missed one little bit is understandable. So no, thank you for that. That sounds like a really interesting piece of research and could do more for us. I don't know if this is a question or maybe something that I just need to go and do some looking into. What I'm wondering is, you said that most other health boards have actually ceased this service. Is that purely financial reasons? And because it does seem, given what we've heard here today, it does seem quite short-sighted.
Yeah, my understanding is, again, I wasn't in the role when the service actually started. It's twofold. I believe it is financial. It was financial, kind of ultimately, because sort of probably about 8 or so years ago, 8-10 years ago, we were actually started to ask to actually tail the funding from Scottish Government started to taper off. So that happened sort of 8 to 10 years ago. My understanding is that across other health boards, when they started the Keep Well programme, it was more minimalist. It was actually more of a sort of short 15 to 20 minute health check, just with blood pressure and a couple of sort of clinical measures, and it wasn't as holistic as our programme. And in fact, our programme was actually hailed at national level to be really excellent and comprehensive at the time. My team leaders within the service were actually attending national and international presentations on the worth of the service and how they'd actually developed it to be a much more comprehensive and therapeutic kind of approach to that. But we were previously managed within our Community Services Directorate within the Health Board, and myself and managers actually took the opportunity for seeking mainstream funding approximately eight or so years ago, and that was very luckily approved at board level. So we were delighted to actually have that service mainstreamed at that time.
Thank you for that. And I think that's forward thinking, which is good. And to be fair, £650,000 per annum for the figures that you've given us in terms of the work that has been done doesn't seem to me to be very expensive. It seems to me that may be a very cost-effective approach. Just one other question I had. Sorry. Sorry, Marie, I didn't see your light.
It's okay. I was just going to comment in the back of what Joanne was saying. Obviously, it's pretty difficult to realise cashable savings around this and understand the impact. So it'll be interesting to see that data coming forward. I've had a number of conversations with Graham around this and how we quantify the impact that the service is having, and not just with this service, but with those preventative measures across the board. So I guess it's just continuing to have those conversations on a whole system basis and trying to recognise GLP-1s as another example of that. The weight loss drugs is another example. How do you recognise what the impact of that is? Although we know there is an impact, how do you quantify that? So, but obviously our ongoing strategic plan, our ongoing whole system conversations with NHS, Forth Valley and Falkirk Council partners involve all of those discussions and how we can make things equitable across services as we move forward with the budget gap that we have. So it was just to add that in as well. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I was so busy listening to Joanne that I didn't notice your light. Just one other question was about the young people and the work that you're doing with young people. Do you link up, for example, with the council's employment training unit and with the other employability organisations in terms of that? Because there's obviously a synergy between the work that you're doing and the work that they're doing.
Yes, we do to an extent. I mean, another hat that I wear is general public health work. So I do link in with our local employability partnerships and a lot of that work to support young people into positive destinations. You will have heard and seen recent news articles on people, not in education or training. So absolutely. Our Thrive to Keep Well programme, interestingly, we actually have funding support from our Falkirk ETU for some of that programme delivery, and we actually ensure that some of the sort of stats and the types of clients that come on the programme are then fed back into ETU. And we provide what's called a warm handover with that kind of work coach in ETU to then support clients to continue their journey once the Thrive programme has finished as well. And the young people, I should also just highlight, in terms of our health assessment, we are closely linked in with our care experienced. There's a care experienced and looked after and accommodated pathway that's been in place, and that's across our NHS Forth Valley school and health visitor family nurse teams, and the Keep Well service supports health assessments within that pathway for young people who are 19 to 26 years old. And that pathway, I'm very happy to share that pathway after the meeting if that was required. Thank you.
I think, given the interest that we've had here today, further information would be very much appreciated about some of the issues we've raised. I'm conscious of the time, and I think we've still got Ian to come in, but I think we have to begin to think about calling a halt at that point, because I suspect we could talk about this all day, and unfortunately we don't have that time available to us. So Ian.
Thank you, Chair. A very quick point, just on the evidencing. The majority of private healthcare providers incorporate an annual assessment, normally a health assessment, so they will definitely have run the numbers on the fact that saves them money in the long run. So in terms of evidencing it, there might actually be some documentation there that actually provides really good statistics on why that assessment actually helps save money, and whether it's a private healthcare provider or NHS, the principles should be the same.
Thank you. That's a useful bit of information. Joanne?
could we possibly link up out with the meeting? That would be really grateful, and I'd be pleased to understand that a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. As I say, we could continue on this topic for a very long time, but unfortunately time is running out for us. So thank you very much, Graham and Joanne. That's been very, very useful. We've only got one more item on the agenda, so you're welcome to stay, because it would be perhaps useful for us to have a wee chat afterwards. So going back to the recommendations for this report, we have been asked to note and comment on the content of the report, noting the Keep Well service is hosted by Falkirk Health and Social Care Partnership and operates across Forth Valley. I think we have undoubtedly noted and commented on the report. Can we agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we only have one final item on the agenda, and that is the assurance report from this committee. We do a report from this committee to the full Integration Joint Board to highlight some of the key matters that have been raised at this committee meeting. And I think Ewan, you could maybe give us just a quick rundown of the things that you've thought, and I think this final item will be big on it on your list.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we'll agree we had a really comprehensive agenda today, and I think it's demonstrable that the energy and the interest stayed to the end in terms of a final agenda item. Just a few brief points of recap. Started with performance monitoring report, including discussions around ED performance, absence rate, whole system flow, delayed discharge recording consistency, adults with incapacity and promotion of power of attorney and psychological therapies performance, and agreed some actions that require to come back to committee. Considered our, as a partnership, our 2 annual public facing reports in terms of the draft annual performance report and the unaudited annual accounts and the draft annual governance statement within those. Considered SIPFA financial management report, and considered and agreed national reports and inspections overview, the annual assurance statement to the IJB as part of our routine annual business. Considered the revised strategic risk register and general support for the approach being taken. Considered and drew assurance from the CAT 1 responder self-assessment. Consider a detailed report in terms of clinical and care governance from the Clinical and Care Governance Management Group. Consider a report in relation to urgent and unscheduled care, and would highlight that that will also be remitted to the IJB. Received Keep Well annual report with a deep dive and a powerful presentation and video and on the impacts, and quite a lot of discussion around how that fits with our future strategic direction through the development of the strategic plan, and the assurance report from PAC to the IJB. Can I just ask, are PAC members assured from the reports and answers and information provided to you in today's meeting?
So does everyone agree that we are assured by the reports and discussions today? I think
agreed.
I think we can agree that. And in terms of the issues that Ewan has highlighted, I think it's important that the particular questions we raised in relation to performance are highlighted, and that this the Keep Well service report is highlighted quite strongly as well. And maybe giving all of the IJB the links. I'm hoping that the presentation and video will be available to everybody, because it would be useful to make it publicly available even on the website. And so can we agree that?
Agreed.
Agreed. So thank you very much to everyone for this. This was quite a lengthy and weighty agenda, and thank you for maintaining your interest right to the death. So when the weekend comes, I wish you all a very good weekend, and we'll see you again soon, no doubt. Thank you very much indeed.